Good morning. It is July 10th. This is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission weekly business agenda. We will start with a roll call.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Cross.
Present.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Oath. Commissioner Ray.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 commissioners present.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. We look forward to the business of the day. The first matter on our agenda is commissioner comments. Does any commissioner have comments? Commissioner Lesner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick update. The next Colorado Produced Water Consortium meeting will be held this Friday, July 12th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's a virtual meeting this time. There is a link on the Produced Water Consortium website if folks would like to participate. There's always general public comment allowed at the consortium meetings. And so if you're interested in providing comment, do sign up on the website. Some of the things we'll be chatting about on Friday include reviewing a final draft of our deliverable 4 from HB 23-1242 regarding the availability of produced water for reuse and recycling. We'll also review a first draft of deliverable 5, which is regarding the necessary infrastructure to achieve different levels of recycling and reuse of produced water in oil and gas operations. And then we'll be reviewing a first draft of deliverable 6, which are general topics related to produced water for recommendations to state agencies and the General Assembly. We'll also have a brief presentation around what the ECMC rulemaking process is in preparation for some future deliverables. So happy to answer any questions folks may have about the meeting on Friday. Otherwise, encourage folks to participate.
That sounds great. Any questions for Commissioner Messner? Thanks for continuing to move that ball down the road there, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Other comments from commissioners? All right, seeing none. We've got one public comment. Yeah, give me just a sec there, Director Murphy. I'm going to call on you too. But if we could go ahead and get Joseph Frost keyed up in the panel. He signed up for public comment. And while we're doing that, I would recognize Director Murphy for comments.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to be a little jumpy. I wanted to flag a couple of staffing changes at, well, not kind of, some are kind of changes, some are changes. First and foremost, we have recently welcomed Byron Gale as our Deputy Director of Operations. He started in this role on July 1st of this month, or of this year. We're really excited to have his expertise and vision to help backfill some of the role that Scott Cuthbertson is leaving with our organization. Scott is going to continue to support a few projects over the coming months, but from July 1st forward, Byron is leading our operations team, and we're thrilled to have him. So that's one piece of it. And then the second piece of it is as some or many may know, I will be going on parental leave sometime between now and the 24th of this month. And in the interim, Aaron Ray has been appointed as interim director, and I couldn't be happier about having somebody with his vision, capability, and even temper taking over during this time. And I'm just really, really grateful that Executive Director Gibbs and Aaron signed up for it. So just wanted to flag for everybody that, you know, I hopefully will be here through 22nd, 23rd. But if something happens sooner, Aaron is fully on board and ready to go. And I really look forward to his leadership while I'm out. Aaron, if you want to say anything, you're welcome to.
Thanks, Director Murphy. It's been an honor representing the department on the commission, and I'm excited to work with the terrific team at ECMC to continue to support the commission's work in this new temporary role. I will miss joining these hearings after today as DNR's ex officio representative to the commission for the next few months, but look forward to being back in this chair once Director Murphy returns. And just, again, looking forward to working with the team at ECMC and continue to support this commission's important work. So thank you.
And that's a great point, Aaron. I guess I should flag that I'll be back first week in November. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for all the updates, and Interim Director Ray, we look forward to having you on board in that new capacity. We know you'll do well. All right. Hearings Manager Thomas, were you able to find Mr. Frost?
Currently, we're not able to locate Mr. Frost in the chat. If he would raise his hand when present, we will elevate him and I will let you know so that he can speak.
Okay, so we'll just continue public comment until the time that Mr. Frost arrives. With that, we move to consent agenda. Does anyone have questions on consent? Anyone like to make a motion to approve consent?
Move to approve consent.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve consent. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. Continuing down our agenda, we will return to Director Murphy with an introduction of carbon capture and storage straw log rules, I believe, as well as kind of an update on just rulemaking in general.
Yep, and I don't have slides for this. I know that we put together some slides when we gave a CCS update to the commission in early June, I think around the 10th, I want to say. I think a number of those dates and deadlines are consistent with what I'm going to announce today, but just wanted to flag that we are releasing straw dog, or kind of an initial draft of CCS rules today. They will be out for the public to review, to comment on, excuse me, and can help continue to advance this important conversation in Colorado. Complementary to that, we have planned in-person and virtual stakeholder meetings on our CCS or Class 6 carbon sequestration rules next week, starting on the 15th of July throughout the state. And also there is a virtual option on Thursday. More information about that is available on our website. We have, while ECMC is hosting those meetings, we've invited Colorado Energy Office and Great Plains Institute, who are leading Colorado's carbon management road mapping efforts, to participate so that we can make sure that there's a complete picture of how the state is approaching carbon management and carbon sequestration, and really how the carbon sequestration rules fit into the broader picture of the state's climate initiatives and goals. So I think that it's important work. I would also remind everybody that when we're talking about Class 6 rules, this is a program that EPA currently administers in Colorado. There are federal regulations that dictate much of how carbon sequestration occurs, and many of the rules that staff is preparing to release today are really built upon those rules, and we'll need to follow them closely. And then some of the rules, especially related to how we interact with community, that are where we have wanted to make sure that Colorado's particular attention to and focus on centering around DI communities is at the forefront. Engagement, accessibility, and transparency. So a lot to announce in that space, but broadly speaking, today we're releasing initial rules. Next week we have planned in-person and virtual stakeholder meetings on not only the rules, but also on the carbon management roadmap. And then we'll be taking feedback from stakeholders over the next couple of weeks with the idea of formally noticing the rulemaking in mid-August, and really looking towards a late October-ish hearing. So it's a pretty packed agenda for this commission this fall, 3 really critical rulemakings. That's update 1 of the rulemaking. The second update I have is that for geothermal, just wanted to let folks know that things are moving along. We've received pre-hearing statements from parties. Staff is reviewing those. I'm sure the other parties are as well. Staff is working on a couple of tweaks in response to those pre-hearing statements and does plan to release revised draft rules in the coming 10 days, I would want to say. And so those will be out. That hearing is scheduled to begin on August 5th, which is also the first day that I believe Commissioner Oath will be seated as a full-time commissioner. And so we're thrilled to have her on board and participating in that hearing. And then the third rulemaking update is around cumulative impacts. As many folks know, staff released a revised notice draft in June. We got some feedback from commissioners, which was helpful. We also had party status requests at the end of June. We are working through feedback that we're receiving and looking forward to receiving pre-hearing statements in the coming week, I want to say. I think they're due the 18th. And working with that feedback and preparing a revised set of staff's draft rules. So lots moving, but really important work and really critical work, and looking forward to the continued collaboration among our stakeholders as we find Colorado's specific solutions to many of these policy questions. And with that, Chair, happy to turn it back to you, happy to answer questions. And again, really appreciate the work of our team and the stakeholders as we engage and embark on these important rulemaking topics.
Great, thank you for the updates. Anyone have questions? Busy few months ahead of us.
I wish you all well. It's gonna be great.
All right. Continuing on the theme of having updates from staff, we now will recognize Michael Rigby, the CCS Geothermal and Underground Gas Storage Coordinator, for an update and presentation around ECMC geothermal and hydrogen study presentations. These studies were authorized by the legislature, and I want to initially applaud Mr. Rigby and his team for the fantastic work they did in getting these studies out. I know it was quite hectic toward the end there. The studies are out. They're up on our homepage, and folks can go there and read through them. Mr. Rigby, look forward to hearing from you about the studies.
Appreciate that, Chair Robbins, and thanks for having me today. I'll just go ahead and I have a little presentation I can walk through and share my screen here. Are you all seeing the presentation?
We are. Looks great.
All right. Thanks again for having me. I'm going to just kind of give a fairly brief update and kind of go through some of the information we've compiled in the studies here that we just released last week. As Chair Robbins indicated, these studies were directed through legislation in 2023 in SB 23-285 and SB 23-16 initiated a set of 6 studies. We released our first of those 6 in February, the CCS safety study, and we released 2 more just last week, the geothermal resource study and the hydrogen regulatory study. And we have 3 additional studies due in December. So let's jump into the geothermal resource study. This study was a collaboration with the Colorado Geological Survey and Tavera, a company who compiled a similar report in Wyoming in 2022. Like I said, we released these early last week on July 1st. The study is entitled Geothermal in Colorado, Resources, Use Strategies, and Impact Considerations. The full report, along with executive summaries in English and Spanish, are available on our ECMC Geothermal Hydrogen CCS library webpage. And they are also currently posted to our homepage in the newsfeed as well. The study used a significant amount of data that had been compiled by the CGS over the last decade, and these data are also posted to our website, and they are the known thermal springs and wells throughout the state, geochemistry of thermal resources throughout the state, and bottom hole temperature data from oil and gas wells across the state. One note of the data is the data is, concentrated in certain areas, sparse in other areas. So as kind of more geothermal activity occurs throughout the state, some of these areas that have less data will be refined and, project by project. So dive in a little bit into what is included in this geothermal resource assessment. There's an overview of existing uses of geothermal resources in the state, as well as geological environments relevant to geothermal in Colorado, kind of diving into what drives our geothermal resources and where the highest potential is. There's also some resource mapping that identifies these areas of highest potential and what uses may be applicable across the state, including conventional technologies such as heating and cooling, as well as existing electricity generation strategies. There's also information on emerging technologies such as enhanced geothermal systems and advanced geothermal systems, which are kind of deep closed loop systems. There's also analysis of the repurposing potential of existing infrastructure, which includes looking at oil and gas wells. Building on that, there's an economic analysis of multiple use scenarios, including a scenario of new drilling for electricity and repurposing existing wellbores. From there, there's an evaluation of potential impacts and benefits of geothermal technologies applicable in our state, as well as a brief summary of the existing regulatory structure for geothermal operations in Colorado. It's a pretty expansive study. It has a lot of really good information in it. So I encourage you all to open up and take a look at the actual file. In this study itself, there's a variety of figures, maps, tables that describe these various technologies, applications, potential opportunities, and associated impacts to help better understand fundamentals of geothermal and also its potential, future potential in reducing emissions across our state. One of these maps that are in here, and like I said, there's dozens of maps and figures, but this one in particular shows different utilization opportunities across the state. Again, this is based on the data that is available. So as projects kind of move forward, some of this could change as data is refined and collected throughout the state. But what this is showing is kind of, it's a cumulative kind of map. So this darker green areas are maybe the areas that have the lowest temperatures present, but geothermal heat pumps are still applicable in those areas. As you go into light green, there are some direct use applications available as well as heat pumps. As you go into the yellow, there's additional direct use applications available, as well as district heating potential, as well as all of those other direct use applications and heat pumps. In the orange, this is where you start to get into low temperature electricity generation potential. And in the red, there's even potential for high temperature electricity. So we do have pretty good resources compared to other states and really a lot of future potential here in Colorado. I just want to give thanks to the Colorado Geological Survey and Tavera for the excellent collaboration and kind of working through all of this data and information and compiling all of this as we, approached our deadline. And a big thanks to Marie Horner and John Morgan here at the ECMC for their hard work getting this finalized. In particular, Marie really stepped up and did a lot of research, as well as bringing all of this data and information together from all of our collaborators and all of these different resources and references. And also John Morgan for help with project management and refining the document as we approached release here. So big thanks to those two. So moving on to the hydrogen study. This is a study completed by DNV in collaboration with us at ECMC. It was also released early last week, and it's entitled Colorado Regulation of Underground Storage and Transport of Hydrogen. Just to go into a little bit of how the study worked, the ECMC and our group here ran the stakeholding process for this study, engaging community organizations, research groups, state and federal agencies, local governments, industry, and environmental organizations. We really were compiling resources, perspectives, information, additional context that we reached out to really inform the study. And we conveyed all of this information to our contractor, DNV, who is compiling research and information, and again, incorporating all of those resources and information that we gained through the stakeholding process. Again, the full report, along with executive summaries in English and Spanish, are available on our library webpage. little bit of what the study includes: an overview of hydrogen, its properties and its uses. It also includes safety and regulatory considerations and recommendations for the underground storage of hydrogen, wellbore storage of hydrogen, pipeline transport, including transporting pure hydrogen, but also blending it into existing natural gas lines, and embrittlement considerations, and also a review of geologic hydrogen, and including the ongoing research of this topic. And for those not familiar with that topic, it is a kind of up-and-coming research area and potential kind of emerging industry that's looking to produce naturally occurring hydrogen or stimulating hydrogen production in the subsurface and producing it through a well. In the study, there's also a large summary of existing regulations and different agencies at the state and federal level that may play a role in regulating the underground storage and transport of hydrogen, and also identifies areas for further consideration at the state level, and encouragement for monitoring the federal legal and regulatory landscape, as this is very much a developing industry and many of these regulations have not been clarified at the federal level. So again, I want to give thanks to DNV for the excellent collaboration on this and their research and efforts on this project. And I want to give specific thanks to Curtis Haverkamp and Bridget Hunley at the ECMC for their work on this project. Specifically, they played a major role in the stakeholding process, gathering all of these perspectives, resources, and information from all of our different stakeholders here in the state, as well as refining and editing and giving great input on the document to get it fully refined and released on time. So big thanks to those two again. And again, I'll just reiterate, there's a lot of detail in these reports, so I encourage just going to our library page and taking a look at the full documents for further details. And we're always happy to answer additional questions as necessary. From there, I just want to say, with all of these emerging industries, deep geothermal, hydrogen, CCS, it's really important to continue to study and collaborate. And these studies really have provided a great opportunity to help inform some paths forward and continue discussions on these topics. And in this effort, we have 3 additional studies coming later this year: a geothermal regulatory study in collaboration with the Division of Water Resources, a pipeline safety study in collaboration with the PUC, and a study of all subsurface injection classes that are under the EPA's authority. And as with all of this, we'll continue to jointly strategize a path forward to establish Colorado as a leader and innovator in resource development in these areas that ensures protection of public health, communities, and environment and wildlife resources. So thanks again for having me today, and that's all I got.
And thank you, Mr. Rigby, for the leadership on these fronts. I know this is a ton of work and a ton of coordination between outside consultants, our staff, and others. And I think you've done an excellent job. This is really going to be helpful for these emerging industries in our state and helps create paths forward for ECMC and others within the state to ensure these things are moving forward. So thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Rigby? Commissioner Cross? You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a specific question. I just also want to extend my appreciation to Mr. Rigby and his team. Curtis, Bridget, Marie, John, all did a fantastic job. As you mentioned, and as Mr. Rigby mentioned, there's also 3 additional studies coming up that he and his team are working on, and we're getting additional help from other members of staff like Elise Devine, and everyone's been putting their heart and soul into this under a lot of information in a short amount of time as required by the legislature, and they're doing a fantastic job. Also, thanks to our contractors who have been doing a fantastic job, the stakeholders who participated in this as well. So it's been a lot of work, and I think the studies so far have been absolutely fantastic, and I look forward to continuing to work on the coming studies as well.
Excellent. Commissioner Messner?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and certainly agree with both you and Commissioner Cross. as far as congratulations on work well done on this. And I had an opportunity to read the geothermal study. And I just have a couple of questions, and I don't want to get in the weeds, and we don't want to take a lot of time with this here today, but I wonder if you could help me better understand, as I was reading the sections around the geology of the different areas in Colorado and how that ties into the different temperatures that are being mapped out as part of the study. And as you look at that, I understand some of it's igneous rock, some of it has more, is more porous, and some of it's going to be more sedimentary targeted, and may have tighter formations that have this potential. As you look at the scope of Colorado as compared to other states, how much do you see conventional versus enhanced geothermal operations happening in these different areas, or do you have a good sense of that yet?
So I think there's a lot of work to be done on site at a site specific level to refine the exact strategies. That said, there's definitely potential for conventional development that would be more in line with what we see around the world right now. There's also a lot of potential with the different heat, and tight rock for different strategies like EGS, and some of these newer technologies like AGS that could be applicable in hotter, drier rocks that don't have the fluid. But there are definitely areas that are showing potential based on the data to have just conventional resources where you would flow groundwater and kind of strip the heat for use at the surface. But so I would say there's going to be a mix of both. We will likely see some movement towards conventional, maybe sooner than later. And EGS, as it develops, I think will open up additional areas in our state that don't work through conventional development.
Great. Thanks for answering my question.
And I appreciate all the feedback, and Commissioner Cross, thanks for your input through these studies as well, and appreciate your help and insight through the process.
Excellent. Further questions? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just didn't want to miss my opportunity to pile on with the thanks here. I don't want Mr. Rigby's common professional behavior to belie the midnight oil that was burned on this study and all the studies, and really appreciate his work and all the work of staff. This was a great deal of work, as are any of these complex studies. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, and I really wanted to congratulate you on, I think this is a great resource for the geothermal effort going forward, and will be a great working document. So thank you again so much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Commissioner Ray?
Ackerman.
I'll just add one more note of thanks and the department's appreciation to Mr. Rigby and the whole team at ECMC that worked on these studies. And I want to highlight one thing that Mike mentioned a couple of times. It's really important to remember, which is these studies are, from my perspective, critical to the ECMC's regulatory work in these areas, but they're also part of the broader state policy sort of framework around geothermal and hydrogen and CCS, as we discussed previously. And I think it really highlights the important work that ECMC does, both to regulate these technologies, but also contribute to that broader state energy policy effort. So thank you, Mike and team, and appreciate ECMC's contribution to the advancing these important issues across the state.
All right. Well, again, we encourage all of our stakeholders and participants to visit the website and dive deep into the studies and learn from them as we continue these efforts on behalf of the state of Colorado. All right, I want to take a 5 minutes break to tee up the next docket, which ends in 0147. If we could get the attorneys and the witnesses up in the next 5 minutes, we'll return at 9:35. All right, welcome back. We are going to take up docket 240600147. The applicant is Garbage Storage Solutions.
And this is a stratigraphic well test proposal. I do note that Jason Maxey is on the record for purposes of speaking, and so perhaps as we normally do, we'll take Weld County up first.
Mr. Chair, currently we don't see Mr. Maxey or Ms. Holliday in the attendees list. We're a bit ahead of schedule. We've reached out to them, so hopefully they can join it. And once they do, we will elevate them. So apologies for a little deviation in our normal proceeding.
No worries. We are ahead of schedule, not a problem. With that, I would recognize Ms. Bould and Mr. Jacobs as attorneys for the applicant, and if they would like to identify themselves as well as their witnesses, the next step would be swearing into the witnesses.
Very good. Thank you and good morning, Mr. Chair. This is John Jacobs with Davis, Graham and Stubbs, outside counsel for Carbon Storage Solutions, the applicant. With me today is my associate, Natalie Bolt, who will be driving our PowerPoint slides. Also with me today are Dan Sanders, president of Carbon Storage Solutions, Mr. Ben Pitsley, co-founder and president of Summit Companies, a member of the Carbon Storage Solutions team, as well as Joe Richardson, vice president of operations for Schneider Summit Services, also a member of the Carbon Storage Solutions team.
Very good. Thank you for the introduction. Attorney General Mercer, if you'd like to swear in the witnesses, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the panelists. I'll just go one by one in the order that I see you on my screen and ask that you each raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth. I'll begin with Mr. Richardson.
Joe Richardson, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Pitsley?
Ben Pitsley, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. And Mr. Sanders?
Dan Sanders, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jacobs, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, commissioners. We're here concerning the Front Range 2-1 stratigraphic well permit application submitted by Carbon Storage Solutions in this docket. Next slide. I'd like to review our presentation for you briefly. We're going to cover project background, a larger sequestration project, just simply for context, the need for this Front Range 2-1 stratigraphic well with respect to that project, the surface disturbance associated with the drilling of this stratigraphic well, the best management practices we intend to engage in to mitigate those surface impacts, the ECMC approval processes applicable to this stratigraphic well application, and our requested relief that you accept the director's recommendation to approve our application, our forms 2A and 2B. We'll move to the proposed location description, brief review of Rule 604 criteria for that location, and then we'll turn to 3 alternative locations in our analysis of those under ECMC rules, involving both our own CCS technical feasibility criteria, as well as ECMC Rule 304B2B criteria. And then once again, we'll conclude with our requested relief that you accept the director's recommendation in this matter. Next slide, please. On the project background, Front Range Energy is a local Windsor, Colorado-owned manufacturer of fuel ethanol, as you may recall. Front Range owns property north of the Kodak Industrial Park in Weld County. It ferments corn to make ethanol, and this creates carbon dioxide as a result of the fermentation process. Thus, our Front Range Energy ethanol manufacturing plant does produce CO2 emissions. To make its operations fully carbon neutral and have an overall carbon negative impact, Front Range proposes injecting CO2 from its fermentation process into the non-hydrocarbon producing pore space underlying its property for permanent sequestration. Front Range Energy created Carbon Storage Solutions, LLC, it's a subsidiary, the applicant here, to study the feasibility of constructing a CO2 injection well on Front Range's property and sequestering the CO2 from its ethanol fermentation process in the deep geologic formations below its Windsor, Colorado plant. Next slide, please. Carbon Storage Solutions obtained approval of a single stratigraphic test well from this commission in 2022, as some of you may recall. That's referred to as the Front Range 1-1 well, to examine the feasibility of the subsurface formations for the geologic storage and permanent sequestration of carbon dioxide as proposed. All indications show that these formations are devoid of economically recoverable hydrocarbons, and that the water quality in each formation qualifies as a saline aquifer under the EPA's Underground Injection Control Program Class 6 rules. Because of this preliminary geologic evaluation through the Front Range 1-1 well, each formation meets the requirements for secure CO2 injection thus far. Next slide, please. Moving on to our proposed Front Range 2-1 stratigraphic well. This is an EPA required well that will monitor pressure, temperature, and allow for formation fluid sampling from the wellbore. Carbon Storage Solutions has submitted a Class 6 UIC well application to EPA Region 8 on May 24th, just a few weeks ago, 2024, which is now undergoing completeness review by EPA. The Front Range 2-1 stratigraphic well, which is the subject of this application, will support the carbon capture and sequestration program proposed by Carbon Storage Solutions and the already ECMC permitted Front Range 1-1 stratigraphic well. Next slide, please. With respect to surface disturbance of the proposed stratigraphic well, initial total surface disturbance area is estimated at 10.82 acres. This is 10.14 acres of the pad location combined with 0.6 acres of an access road that's approximately 60 feet wide by 490 feet in length. Post interim reclamation, the unreclaimed acreage will amount to less than an acre, just 0.95 acres of disturbed area. At the present time, this parcel is zoned for agriculture, and the surface tenant uses this parcel for cropland cultivation, corn and barley growing, and intends to continue this use indefinitely. Next slide, please. Regarding best management practices, regardless of the well location, we've committed to follow BMPs to reduce impacts on public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. In particular, dust suppression measures such as speed restrictions on site, stabilizing topsoil stockpiles, regular road maintenance, including water or mag chloride applications to keep dust down from necessary traffic. Other traffic minimization and mitigation measures will include keeping the drilling crew on site in temporary housing to minimize ingress and egress each day, automated installation on site, automation installation on site to reduce required visits, and the utilization of nearby resources when available, such as water supply. Next slide. Examples of BMPs involved include our calculation here on the chart to the left in this slide, tabulating all of the days of impact for various activities on site, including pad and short lease road access, sound wall erection, setting the conductor, move in and rig up activities in the middle there for drilling operations themselves, as well as rig down and move out activities. And then during completion, wireline services. As you can see, those are all tabulated and quantified for purposes of identifying the impacts, which are transitory and temporary, and measuring and then mitigating those impacts through our adherence to BMPs. On the right in this slide in the picture is a data shack or shed that will be present on site other than this housing equipment to read data from the well and to communicate those data via telemetry wirelessly off-site. There will simply be this data shed and the wellhead itself on the pad and nothing else. So the impact is really about the same as a cell phone impact at that point, and then visually the shed itself. Next slide, please. During construction, drilling, and completion phase, our air quality practices will include applying suppressants to control fugitive dust, utilizing a closed loop drilling system, refraining from the use of reserve pits, and utilization of water-based muds to minimize volatilization of non-water-based mud constituents. Water resource measures include a site-specific stormwater management plan to protect waters of the state, safe handling of materials to prevent runoff, including good housekeeping and spill prevention practices, energy dissipators for stormwater, such as coconut blankets, straw mulch, and straw wattles, used to installed during construction and left until disturbed slopes have revegetated and stabilized. Concerning soil resources, will limit construction activities during wet periods. We'll be cross-ripping all areas that are compacted by operations to decompact them, regrading cut and fill areas awaiting revegetation or reclamation, grading the topsoil stockpile to ensure that all surfaces can be stabilized, and implementing a spill prevention control and countermeasure or SPCC plan to protect soil from potential spill impacts. Concerning potential odor impacts, we'll be continuously hauling drill cuttings off-site to an approved disposal facility. When tripping out of the hole, we'll wipe down residual water-based mud, and there's a catch system to be employed around the blowout prevention device at the well that will be utilized to catch any mud and prevent spillage onto the ground. We'll minimize light pollution during these activities as well, using LED light sources to reduce sky glow, positioning lights to cast downward, and directing lights to tasks only and away from off-location buildings. Next slide, please. Concerning the approval process thus far, and again, just for context, in 2022, this commission provided approval of the Front Range 1-1 stratigraphic well. In 2023, the commission issued Standing Order 1-326 to streamline the drilling of stratigraphic wells like the Front Range 1-1 well, so as to not require waivers of unnecessary parts of the OGDP process for such wells that will never produce hydrocarbons. In summary, it requires a hearing in front of the commission if any Rule 304B2B criteria are met, and an alternative location analysis is then required. For the proposed Front Range 2 location, which is the subject of this application, CCS has completed Forms 2A and 2B in accordance with Standing Order 1-326. And we proposed a working pad surface that is within 2,000 feet of one single residential building unit, and that is a Rule 304B2B criterion that triggers this hearing. We have also Carbon Storage Solutions performed an alternative location analysis in connection with this application, and we'll get to the details of that in a few slides. Next slide, please. So just to get to the request, obviously, we'd like you to approve of the director's recommendation that we have this stratigraphic well permit application complies with all applicable requirements of the commission's rules, and therefore you should adopt the director's recommendation to approve the application. Next slide. Concerning the location analysis, this stratigraphic well needs to be between 1.2 and 1.5 miles from the bottom hole location, or BHL, on the indicated aerial photo to your right of the in this slide, of the Front Range 1-1 well to act as a monitoring well for CO2 sequestration. And this is a requirement of the Class 6 program exclusively administered currently by federal EPA. The proposed location is on land owned by Front Range Energy, CSS's parent corporation, in unincorporated Weld County, and adjacent parcels are used for industrial, agricultural, and residential purposes. Next slide, please. Regarding cultural features in proximity to the proposed location, Rule 604A requires a well to be located greater than 200 feet from buildings, public roads, above-ground utility lines, and railroads, greater than 150 feet from a surface property line. And Rule 604B requires a working pad surface to be located greater than 2,000 feet from a school facility, a child care center, and greater than 500 feet from a residential building unit or RBU. This aerial photo is obviously centered on the proposed location, and then the halos, as defined in the legend there, show you the distances from that relative to some of these other cultural features. And we've satisfied all of those requirements, hence the green check marks next to each of the criteria listed to the left. Next slide, please. Rule 304B2B requires an alternative location analysis if the working pad surface is less than 2,000 feet from an RBU or high occupancy building unit, school facility, childcare center, municipal or county boundary, or proximate local government objects from a disproportionately impacted community, residential building unit, high occupancy building unit, or school facility, or less than 1,500 feet from a designated outside activity area, or if it's within a floodplain, a surface water supply, and within 2,640 feet of a public water system supply well, within a wetland or riparian corridor, or within high priority habitat. And we have a red box around the RBU, as you've noticed, and if you look at the diagram, you can see that although the residential building unit in question, it's a little green icon up to the upper right of the circle there. That's the distance in red from the proposed location to the one residential building unit. The pad, as you can see, is pretty large. And so it's just under 2,000 feet to the residential building unit from the edge of the pad. However, the well is located more than 2,000 feet from the residential building unit. Either way, we've triggered this analysis, this alternative location analysis, because of that distance from the pad to the RBU. Next slide. Carbon storage solutions considerations for technical feasibility drove much of the analysis and identification of alternative locations, which are depicted on the aerial photo in this slide as ALA 1, 2, and 3. They need to be, as I mentioned before, 1.2 to 1.5 miles from the bottom hole location, which is in the center there and connected and shown, and the distance is shown from that bottom hole location to each of the proposed location and the alternative locations on the diagram. And again, Class 6 regulations require that this monitoring well, if in fact it becomes permitted as a monitoring well in connection with the Class 6 well permit that is submitted to EPA, it be proximate to the bottom hole location there to serve as an appropriate monitoring well to gauge temperature and pressure and migration of CO2 in the subsurface. We have also considered proximity to other oil and gas wells and their activities at the surface, and wish to avoid being too close to them. And we have surface use agreements in place in the proposed location. And then, of course, the ECMC criteria related to these alternative locations are also considered in the subsequent slides that look at each of these alternative locations for you. Next slide, please. With respect to alternative location 1, ALA 1, there are advantages and disadvantages that we'll list for each of these locations. For ALA 1, it is on the plus side, not within 2,000 feet of residential building units, high occupancy building units, schools, or childcare centers, and it is not within a DI community. It is near the Windsor city boundary, but the city supported CSS when we were seeking approval of the Front Range 1-1 stratigraphic well location. So we see that as a net positive. On the minus side, on the disadvantage side, we are near 2 recreational trails, near a freshwater pond. At this alternative location, it is within a 100-year FEMA floodplain, and it is within several high priority habitat areas, which will be more easily seen on our slide 19 in a few minutes. Next slide, please. With respect to ALA 2, the advantage is that it's over 2,000 feet from a high occupancy building unit, a school, or a childcare center, and it's not within a DI community under the ECMC criteria, but it is within 500 feet of a residential building unit. It is within the 100-year FEMA floodplain, It is near, close to a high priority habitat area, as again will be seen on slide 19. And it's near the Greeley city boundary, and we're not aware of the city of Greeley's position on our project thus far. It's not been necessary to determine that, although it would be if we were to use this location. So those are the negatives and the positives at ALA 2. Next slide, please. With this alternative location, we have the advantages of being over 2,000 feet from a high occupancy building unit, schools, childcare centers, and designated outside activity areas under ECMC criteria. And it is also not within a DI community. However, it is within 2,000 feet of several residential building units. It's near freshwater ponds, and it is within 2 high priority habitat areas, as we'll see on the very next slide. And you'll see all 3 areas shown in proximity to established high priority habitat areas. Next slide, please. There we see the proposed location, upper center, ALA 1 in high priority habitat areas, ALA 3 lower right, also in high priority habitat areas, and ALA 2 quite close to bald eagle roost site high priority habitat areas shown in the diagonal crosshatched orange or light orange. Next slide, please. The proposed location has advantages that outweigh the disadvantages of ALAs 1, 2, and 3 in our view. And to address the limited disadvantages of the proposed location, we are obtaining consent from the RBU. We have obtained consent, excuse me, from the residential building unit owner that is just under 2,000 feet from the edge of the pad, but more than 2,000 feet from the well to the north and east. As you saw in our prior slide, we have proposed the well to be further away than 2,000 feet on the pad. So not in the center or at the far edge of the pad, but kind of lower left on the pad to stay further away from that residential building unit. And as we summarized previously, we're intending to implement best management practices to provide substantially equivalent protections to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, wildlife resources. Next slide. So with all of that, we again urge you to approve of the director's recommendation to approve our forms 2A and 2B for the drilling of the Front Range 2-1 stratigraphic well to allow this project to go forward. Next slide. We would welcome any questions you have. We have some supplemental slides depending on if you have questions and the nature of your questions. And of course, President of Carbon Storage Solutions, Dan Sanders here can answer questions more generally about the ethanol plant and these plans. And of course, we have Mr. Pitsley and Mr. Richardson as well to answer questions specific to the well and the project.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, the panel is open for questions. Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and perhaps we can take the slide deck down if possible. I can see a little better. Thank you. I do just have a couple of questions. Thank you for your work on this application. I think it's a good application. Can someone talk just a little bit more about the exact end utilization of data from the monitoring well? Does it trigger certain actions if certain thresholds are reached, or is it simply a data gathering well that will go into a data point in management decisions in the future?
I believe it's simply a monitoring well. As proposed, it goes deeper than necessary to monitor CO2 if the Class 6 well permit is issued and carbon capture and sequestration occurs. But it serves as a source of data for EPA in that regard. So we've accessed or will access several formations that Mr. Richardson can discuss to obtain data on potential underground sources of drinking water, which of course is the whole point of the UIC program under the Safe Drinking Water Act administered by EPA under the Class 6 program.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs, and Jacobs, excuse me, and I'm pausing in case Mr. Sanders has anything to add.
Yeah, no, I was going to reiterate what John had to say there. The data from this well will be a requirement of EPA is to provide that data to them at periodic levels throughout the life cycle of this project, which is anticipated to be a 12-year span at this point. And so that's the purpose of this well and the data coming from the well. It will also help us, in our any sort of remedial response plans if we detect the plume area or fluid samples that are not adhering to the Class 6 standard.
Very helpful. Thank you both for those comments. My final question is, I know that strat wells at times are considered for potential conversion to other use. Is there anything contemplated in your plan going forward that would ultimately work towards conversion of this into a sequestration well or other type of utilization?
No.
Great, thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Others with questions? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation and the information. I just wanted to make sure that I understood a couple of things, Mr. Jacobs. I think you indicated in the presentation, and at least it was my understanding in reading the application, that that your perspective was that this was going to be reviewed under 604B3 because the equipment with the most potential impact is further than 2,000 feet away from the RBU. Is that correct? Even though the working pad surface boundary is actually closer than 2,000 feet, the actual any equipment that may be potentially impactful would be sited further than that. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. And I believe Mr. Pitsley could speak to that more specifically. But having triggered the less than 2,000 foot analysis, we're further mitigating any impact to that proximate RBU by locating our equipment further south and west on the pad.
I'm just making sure I'm understanding which rule I'm reviewing this under, because you had indicated substantial equivalency, and that's rule 604B4, which would indicate that the equipment would be closer than 300 feet or 2,000 feet, sorry. But I think it's actually further than 2,000 feet.
Yes, you're
and
correct.
So it's actually reviewed under 604B3. And I just want to make sure that that is your perspective as well.
I think that's correct.
Yes, Director Messner, the well and the equipment, I think are roughly 2,078 feet from the RBU. John has the exact measurements on his head, but it is over 2,000 feet.
That's what I read in the application. So you confused me, Mr. Jacobs, when you said substantial equivalency, because that's a 604B4 requirement, not a B3 requirement. So
apologies for any confusion.
And then my other question is, this is out of curiosity. The understanding this is one well, and the interim reclamation is going to bring it down to below an acre. What's the need for 10 acres for that initial surface disturbance?
That's something Joe can jump in on. We got with our drilling team and laid out a diagram on actually developing this well and how much space we required, and that dictated the initial construction of the pad. Yeah.
Yeah, the pad size is dictated by the size of the drilling rig and the equipment associated to go to these depths.
So it's a bigger drilling rig that requires the 10 acres. And I'm asking this out of curiosity because we don't review these very often, right? So typically when we're seeing a 10-acre pad, there's, MLVTs involved, there's other equipment that it's involved that would require that big a pad. But for a single well, it seems big. So I'm just kind of trying to learn more.
No, that's a good question. It's coming back to me. Sorry, I'm going to jump in there again on you, Joe. When we originally laid this out, we thought we could do this with an 8-acre pad. But then when Uinta Engineering came in and developed our cut fill diagram, we realized that our stockpile was going to be so large that they needed to expand the overall disturbance up to 10 acres. But immediately developing this well, we're going to rip everything back through interim rec and bring it to less than an acre. But that was the impetus to go from 8 up to 10. It's apologies, it's coming back to me. It was a while ago.
No, that's okay. That makes sense because the deeper well requires more storage, so that's helpful. And then I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the barriers to, or that are necessitating having to truck fresh water to location versus utilizing, lay flat lines or other ways of being able to bring fresh water to site, not requiring hauling it.
Yeah, so we are across multiple county roads and railroad right-of-ways. We're going to haul all of our fresh water from the plant that already exists. So that's why we're doing it instead of using lay flat. There's not a source that's easily accessible.
Mr. Sanders' plant just to the south of this location.
Okay.
I don't know if you know the distance, Dan, but it's within eyeshot.
Yeah, it's about a half-mile distance.
Okay, that's helpful. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Others with questions? All right, seeing no further questions, Mr. Thomas, did you ever find our public commenter, or did you ever find the folks from Weld County?
Mr. Maxey has been elevated. Still no sign of our public commenter.
All right, Mr. Maxey.
Good morning, commissioners. Apologies for being on a few minutes late here. Thank you for circling back to me. I'm Jason Maxey with the Weld County Oil and Gas Energy Department, and our comments this morning are going to be very, very brief in nature. We submitted some 2A comments to you all, which should be a part of the record during that public comment section for this item in front of you. And our comments are basically just in general support of this. We have worked with Mr. Pitsley primarily on some back and forth information regarding this project. We did not at the time have a permitting process for this type of a proposal. Our code is recently changing, and there are some new things that we will take a look at in the future for this type of a project. But at this point, Weld County just in general is supportive of the project for Mr. Pitsley and the group that he is with today. And we really don't have any further comments. We're aware of what's going on up in the Windsor area. We've stayed in good contact with Mr. Pitsley and his group. But at this point, it's fairly high level, a little bit out of the ordinary for our normal comments, but we did want to come on here and say that we are supportive of this project. So happy to answer any general questions, but just very brief this morning for this project.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Maxey. We always value and appreciate Weld County's perspective on projects. Does anyone have questions of Mr. Maxey? All right, seeing none, we'll let you go until further notice. Thanks much. All right, any final questions for the panel? We move into deliberation stage. Does any commissioner desire to initiate deliberations? Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say that I appreciate the work that's being done by this operator to further the practice and implementation of carbon sequestration in the state. It's a considerable amount of work and effort and expense to do so, both through our process and also through the processes of the EPA. I wanted to note that stratigraphic wells are normally administrative approval as per Commission Order 1-326. This one came to us for extra process, specifically because it triggered an ALA due to the 1 RBU within 2,000 feet of the initial 10-acre working pad surface. Although, as noted, that RBU will ultimately be outside of 2,000 feet from the wellhead and the meter house and the things that are left on the final 0.95 acre location. Wanted to state that I appreciate the operator's additional ALA work as well as their additional work in moving this issue through the commission. And to my fellow commissioners, I just wanted to state if this issue arises in the future on strat wells, it makes sense to me that we keep an eye on this process. If in the event, as in this case, 100% informed consent is gained, as well as final equipment being outside of the 2,000 feet, it might make sense to continue to remand this for administrative approval in the future. I wanted to reiterate for those who might be listening that there's no production of hydrocarbons associated with this monitoring well, and there's no hydraulic fracturing. It avoids high priority habitat. There were no concerns raised by the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment or by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. It's not in a sensitive area for water resources. And as noted, we do have informed consent from the one RBU owner, and there aren't any other building units within the area. And as noted, there are a variety of BMPs specifically intended to protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. I think, Mr. Chair, this is a great effort to continue to further this technology and some good work that was done by this operator. And if the time's appropriate, I'm willing to make a motion for approval.
Thanks for the deliberative comments. Others? Would you like to make a motion, Commissioner Ackerman?
Yes, please. I move to approve. I don't think that staff recommended any conditions of approval, but maybe AAG Mercer can make sure that I'm on base with that.
AAG Mercer?
Thank you. You're correct, Commissioner Ackerman. It would just be a motion for approval.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to the applicant and to our staff for the good work on this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're now going to take up in our calendar a docket 230700250. This has to do with Bayhorse Petroleum. It is an enforcement default. Do we have staff ready to provide information on this docket?
We are elevating staff right now.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Let me just share my screen quickly. Okay, and hopefully you can see a presentation. Oh, but it looks like
Yeah.
you're in.
Can you get a little closer to your microphone? It's a little bit hard to hear you.
Let's see, is this better?
That's better.
Okay, I'll just talk loudly. And is this showing the full presentation or is it showing presenter mode?
It's got your notes on it, so
Okay,
you might
that's what I
want to.
thought. I don't know why that's happening.
Yeah, we still see the next slide in your notes, unfortunately. Let's give it another shot.
Yeah, let's try to figure something out. Maybe if I start it beforehand. How about now?
There you go.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for bearing with me as I figured that out. My name is Sierra Schroeder, and I am an enforcement advisor here with ECMC. And today I will be presenting on Bayhorse Petroleum for an order finding violation. They are operator number 10234. So some background, Bayhorse had all of their wells were either abandoned, plugged and abandoned, or closed between 2008 and 2017. They are the operator of record of 9 wells in 2 different counties, Baca and Kiowa. These 9 wells, have not passed final reclamation or they have no reclamation status at this time. And then back in 2018, Bayhorse had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that was administered and closed in January of 2022. They also hold financial assurance with us. They have 4 different bonds, a $30,000 individual cash plugging bond, a $20,000 cash plugging bond, and a $10,000 cash plugging bond, which were combined into a $60,000 blanket combined cash bond. And then getting more into the violations here, we're going to talk about 2 different rules that are at issue. The first is Rule 1002F2, which requires operators to implement and maintain best management practices, or BMPs, to control stormwater runoff in a manner that minimizes erosion, transport of sediment off-site, and site degradation. These BMPs must be maintained until the facility is abandoned and final reclamation is achieved pursuant to Rule 1004, and they must be implemented in accordance with good engineering practices. And then Rule 1004A is about final reclamation, and it requires operators to backfill all pits and mouse and rat holes upon plugging and abandonment, as well as requiring all debris, surface equipment, and abandoned gathering and flow line risers to be removed within 3 months of closure. And then all other equipment, supplies, weeds, rubbish, etc. must be removed and reclamation completed within 12 months of the well being plugged. So bearing these in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the inspections that brought us where we are today. So in August of 2017, staff received a Form 4 from Bayhorse requesting a final reclamation inspection. So then in December, staff went out to conduct that inspection, and they observed weed vegetation on the site, that the access road had not been reclaimed, and that soils along the access road were compacted, so they did not believe that final reclamation had been completed. Staff issued corrective actions to Bayhorse to correct these issues, and then they conducted subsequent inspections in January of 2019 and February of 2021, and staff saw no changes to the well site. And additionally, during the 2021 inspection, staff noted that there was a lack of BMPs to minimize transport of sediment off-site and to prevent site degradation. So bearing that in mind, let me show you the photos first. In 2017, you can see that there's a lot of weeds on the site. In this picture on the left, they're as high as a shovel. So that's some significant weeds. And then the access road is also covered with some weeds and needs reclamation because you can still see. And then in 2021, you can see that the site had degraded pretty significantly. There's just barren soils and significant erosion on the location. So bearing all that in mind, in 2021, staff issued an NOAV to Bayhorse citing violations of Rules 1002F2 and 1004A. Then in February of 2024, we filed a notice and application for hearing and had notice of this published in the Daily Journal, the Plainsman Herald, the Kiowa County Press, and the Lamar Ledger. We also tried to contact Bayhorse by mailing them the notice to the address on file with the commission, and we actually received a signed copy back, which was nice. That doesn't happen often in these kinds of cases. And then a few days later, we received a phone call from Mr. Larry Melanowski, who is the principal agent for Bayhorse, and he informed us that Bayhorse had gone through bankruptcy and that they had dissolved as a company and were no longer operating within the state. We then discussed this with the Attorney General's office, and they advised us to treat Bayhorse as a defunct operator, as though no one was there to talk to. We then calculated a penalty for both of these rule violations, and they are both classified as Class 2 by our enforcement guidance and penalty policy. And they are moderate violations because of actual impacts to the environment, which is a $5,000 per day daily penalty. And this came out to $552,760. So now we are asking that you all grant our proposed order and direct the director to suspend Bayhorse's Form 10s, terminate their operator number, rescind their Form 1, revoke Bayhorse's authorization to conduct oil and gas operations in Colorado, and foreclose their existing financial assurance. We are also requesting, although you're not required, to declare Bayhorse's wells and locations orphan sites, use funds from the Energy and Carbon Management Cash Fund to investigate, prevent, monitor, or mitigate conditions that threaten to or actually cause adverse environmental impacts, and claim all of Bayhorse's equipment and saleable product as property of ECMC. And if you have any other questions, I would be happy to answer those. I think you're muted, Mr. Chair, or I can't hear you anyway.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you for the presentation. We appreciate it. Commissioners, the witness is available for questions.
There are no witnesses, it's just me.
Ms. Schroeder is available for questions. I guess one question, and you may not have the answer to this, but the wells were plugged, abandoned, closed by 2017, and staff noted from 2017 inspections that there were problems. It then waited 18, 19, 20, 4 years and to do the NOAV, and now we're 3 years after that. Do you have any sense of the timing here? I mean, it seems like this has sort of been languishing out there for quite a while that we knew about it, but, you know, we're only here, you know, 8, 9 years later, getting to a point of actually taking action.
Yeah, I think part of it is that they were going through those bankruptcy proceedings. So we always want to wait until bankruptcy proceedings are done before we move forward on an action. And then I think the other part is just staff resources and availability. So we don't always have the time or the people to get out and do the inspections and then get the NOAVs issued. And then also with enforcement, we have quite a backlog. So just getting to the cases, this isn't necessarily a priority to get done immediately. I think it's a variety of things, but mostly just comes down to time and resources.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just one question, Ms. Schroeder. I thank you for enumerating the relief requested by staff, including the termination of Bayhorse's authorization to operate in Colorado, along with other relief as you detailed. Those are appropriate actions, I think, given the operator's ultimate potential liability to the state. My question is, does this also effectively terminate any Bayhorse principals authorization to operate in the state under any other auspice or organizational structure?
In this instance, we did not include that language that would prevent the principal agent from coming in under a different name. Sometimes we include that in other orders, but that was not the case here.
Thank you. Could you elaborate on why not, what the differences were that didn't send us down that road?
Sure. I think the difference is that usually we'll include that language if the operator seems to be, or the principal agent seems to be more of a bad faith kind of operator, or they've had a lot of issues in the past. This was more the case of an operator who just ran out of money. And so they left the state for that reason, not because they were so bad that they had so many violations piling up.
Thank you for the clarification.
Other questions? Does any commissioner desire to make a motion? Commissioner Messer with maybe a question.
No, I was gonna make a motion, Mr. Chair. So I'll make a motion to approve the order finding violation against Bayhorse Petroleum in docket number 230700250.
Commissioner Messner, does your motion include the placement of the wells on the orphan well list or not?
So my understanding is that was included in the proposed order, and so it would include those, but.
AG Mercer?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, that's correct. The order, proposed order allows at the director's discretion for her to place the wells on the orphan well list. So if it's a motion to approve it as is, that's the situation.
Okay. Commissioner Cross?
I will second. I just wanted to make that clarification as well.
Okay, motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Maybe let's take up the next enforcement matter before we go to break. That is docket 2403-00072. Another enforcement default. The operator is Paradox Upstream. I believe we are looking for either Mr. Schultz or Ms. Stafford or Mr. Smeltz.
Mr. Schultz.
Good morning, Chair Robbins. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Scott Schultz, and along with Caitlin Stafford, we are before you on a proposed order finding violation number 1V937 involving the operator Paradox Upstream LLC. This is docket, I think you already said it, but docket 240300072. I have a short presentation, but I am happy to take any questions at any time. This is another bankruptcy matter, so I'll try to distinguish that a little bit from Ms. Schroeder's case with the operator Bayhorse. So a little background for Paradox Upstream LLC. They are an operator of record of 135 wells in San Miguel and Montrose counties. Between August 25th, 2022 and September 14th, 2022, ECMC staff issued 9 separate NOAVs to Paradox for violations at seven separate wells. These violations include failures to conduct the required MITs and Bradenhead testing, and also failing to submit complete and accurate reports. The NOAV violations also include Rule 217A. Paradox failed to file the correct and proper Form 8s that involves the oil and gas levy payments. And also Paradox's NOAV include violation of Commission Order 1266 concerning non-payment of production proceeds. So these NOAVs, again, were issued back by ECMC staff back in 2022. You can see kind of the breakdown between the NOAVs and the act and the rules violated in the right-hand column. These are the 7 wells that are involved in the proposed OFE 937. This is a little procedural history of this docket involving Paradox. Again, there are 9 separate NOAVs issued. This was back in August and September of 2022. Importantly, on May 22nd, 2023, Paradox filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of Texas, Houston Division. This is bankruptcy case number 23-90558 in re Paradox Resources LLC et al. This Chapter 11 bankruptcy case involving Paradox Upstream LLC remains ongoing. So that is different than the last matter you heard, in which the bankruptcy case had wrapped up and finished. Enforcement staff applied for this order finding violation hearing back in March 18th of this year, 2024. The proper notices were mailed to both the operator and the surety. We filed, Ms. Stafford and I filed a motion to schedule this OFE hearing before the commission. That motion was granted by Hearing Officer Smeltz back on April 30th, 2024. And then we got to this date, July 10th. We requested specifically this date to have this hearing held, and we're before you today. The proposed order finding violation to Paradox includes that the commission find Paradox in violation of the act and rules for the operator's conduct occurring prior to May 22nd, 2023. Again, that is kind of the magic day of when the bankruptcy case was filed. This proposed OFV requests that the commission suspend Paradox's Form 10s and certificates of clearance. ECMC enforcement staff is requesting that the commission terminate Paradox's operator number, rescind their Form 1, rescind the Paradox's authorization to conduct oil and gas operations in Colorado. And lastly, the proposed OFE requests that the commission foreclose Paradox's existing financial assurance. And you see that listed at the very bottom of the slide. Now, the proposed OFV before you commissioners is a little different than the case involving the operator Bayhorse. There's specific language in which the director is authorized but not required to take the following actions. And you'll see that the phrase, unless transferred to another operator, declare Paradox's wells orphaned wells. This proposed order 1V937 is a bit of a protective order in terms of this is an ongoing bankruptcy case. The assets of Paradox Upstream LLC have been acquired in the bankruptcy case by another entity. That entity is still going through all of the paperwork and all the requirements to actually transfer the wells and locations to the new entity. So that's why we have this unique verbiage of unless transferred to another operator, because there likely will be some of Paradox LLC's wells transferred to another operator. And then lastly, Caitlin and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You're muted, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, using a different microphone. So I just was calling to see if anyone had questions for the staff here. Commissioner Cross?
I'll admit I was going to ask a little bit of questions about the status there of the Chapter 11 and if it was being sold, and it sounds like it may be, and there may be some wells. Do you have an idea of how many wells may be transferred to the new operator?
I won't get into too many of the discussions, Commissioner Cross, about the discussions we've had with this entity, but they are saying that they are looking to transfer all of the wells. But we'll see. There is this time period in bankruptcy court where they are able to essentially shed assets. Again, they have been acquired in the bankruptcy court, but then having them meet all the proper paperwork and get officially transferred to the, via the ECMC procedures, I think is another story. So I think we're just kind of in a holding period, and we had some concerns about the status of the bonds in the bankruptcy court proceedings, which is why we wanted to bring this to your attention today, because we had some concerns about some bankruptcy proceedings and the future of the bonds that the state currently holds.
That was my only question. So unless others have questions, I'm happy to move to approve the order finding violation. Again, clarifying as we did with the last one that it does have these potential director actions pending a potential transfer to another operator.
We have a motion?
I'll second that, but I do have a quick question. And I'm assuming that even in the case of bankruptcy, the transfer of these wells, the receiving operator would be required to have complete and current financial assurance associated with these wells. And so a little bit of a rhetorical question, but as folks are listening, I think it's important to highlight that.
Yes, Commissioner Messner, they will have to meet all of the rules and regulations of ECMC that it involves properly bonding this. So they are still kind of going through the bonding calculations. So I think the ECMC staff is kind of in a wait and see position regarding the wells that have been acquired in bankruptcy, and to see what is transferred properly through ECMC rules and regs.
Thank you. My second stands.
Motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's take a morning break of 10 minutes before we take up our next docket and return at 10:46. All right, welcome back. It is 10:46 on July 10th. We are continuing our business agenda of the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Next on the docket is docket number 2401-00021, an oil and gas development plan for Verdad Resources. I understand that we have Mr. Timmerman from staff to make some statements before we hear from Mr. Maxey from Weld County, and then we'll go to the applicant.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Derek Timmerman, and I'm the location assessment specialist who worked on the Verdad Boyston OGDP application. I would like to correct and clarify a mistake that was published on the director's recommendation for the Verdad Boyston 3535 OGDP. The director's recommendation states that there will be 25 weeks of completions and flowback, while the application material indicates that the proposed completion timeframe should be 38 days, 23 days for hydraulic fracturing, and 15 days for flowback. Please note that this does not change our recommendation for conditional approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timmerman. Appreciate the clarification. Those things happen. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Maxey.
Thank you, Chair Robbins, and good morning again, commissioners. And just to address it right off the bat, Weld County doesn't have any concerns or questions with Mr. Timmerman's update on the director's final recommendation. Again, for the record, my name is Jason Maxey, Weld County Oil and Gas Energy Department. And a little bit more as usual compared to the previous case, a little bit more substantive comments on the next two Weld County items. For this one in front of you, for Verdad's Boydston 3535 OGDP, Weld County held our usual pre-app meeting for this location back in August 23rd, to be specific, of 2023. So close to a year ago now, at which several alternative sites were discussed as per our normal process. Attendees were Weld County staff, and along with us and Verdad, who attended, obviously were ECMC staff, CDPHE staff, and BLM representatives. For the record, CPW was invited but did not attend. Regardless of attendance, all invitees to that meeting did receive a copy of the final official meeting notes. We received our application for this location in January 2024, the 18th to be specific. And there was some little bit back and forth for some clarification on those application materials, but the final application was submitted to us on February 6th, 2024. Within that application, Verdad included 3 alternative sites, which were reviewed and discussed in detail with our staff. And at our hearing, the Weld County hearing officer discussed and reviewed those same 3 alternative sites with the applicant at that time. During that discussion with staff and then with the hearing officer, the location in front of you right now, the Boydston 3535, was determined to be the best location. There are no Weld County defined building units within the 1041 WOGLA zone. We did send notices of our hearing to 5 individual property owners, but we received, excuse me, we received no questions, no requests for participation in our hearing from anybody that we sent notice to, including referral agencies. We held our hearing on April 11th of 2024, and again, the hearing officer considered testimony at that hearing. We found the application to be complete and compliant with Weld County code requirements, and he subsequently approved the Weld County permit. The final order has been recorded with the clerk and recorder, and it was noticed in the Greeley Tribune on April 20th. And the approved permit is valid for 3 years, in which that Verdad must start construction within that time frame, or an extension needs to be requested of us. We don't have any further concerns or questions or comments regarding this OGDP in front of you. And again, we have read through the director's recommendation to you all and acknowledge Mr. Timmerman's comments, and have no further questions or comments to add, we would support approval of this permit. Thank you. We can't hear you, Chair.
Any other questions for Mr. Maxey? Thank you for being with us and for making us aware of Weld County's perspective with regard to the application. Mr. Pashala, you are recognized. If you could elevate your witnesses, we'll get them sworn in next.
They are both elevated. If they would just turn on their cameras, we can get them sworn in.
AG Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the panelists. I'll just go one at a time and ask you each to raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth. Let's begin with Ms. Mitchell. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. My name is Heather Mitchell, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Cognetti?
My name is Michael Cognetti, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. And Mr. Berghorn?
It's Jeff Berghorn, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Pashala, if you would like to go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Robbins, Commissioners, Director Murphy, and staff. My name is Joe Pershala with Wellborn, Sullivan, Meck, and Tooley, and I represent Verdad Resources, LLC. I'm pleased to present the Boydston 3535 Oil and Gas Development Plan. Before we get going, I'd like to just thank staff for all of their work on this application and that of Mr. Maxey for his work and comments in support of the Boydston OGDP. Presenting for Verdad today is Heather Mitchell, Verdad's regulatory manager, and also available for questions are Mike Cognetti and Jeff Berghorn. Verdad's application requests that the Commission approve an oil and gas development plan covering approximately 652 acres within Township 9 North, Range 60 West in Weld County. The proposed development is planned from the existing Boydston 3535 pad. That's location ID 466345. The location currently has 7 producing horizontal wells on it. Those wells produce from a spacing unit outside of the OGDP mineral development area. Verdad is proposing to enlarge that location to allow for an additional 10 new horizontal wells for a total of 17 horizontal wells on the location. The location is sited just outside of the mineral development area and is located on fee surface in a rural part of Weld County. As you heard from Mr. Maxey, Weld County is the relevant local government, which approved the Boydston 3535 pad at 1041 WOGLA 23-0070, and there are no proximate local governments. Verdad owns 100% of the leasehold in the drilling and spacing unit that covers the mineral development lands and therefore has the right to develop. The spacing unit contains entirely fee minerals. Verdad is requesting approval of a companion Rule 305 drilling and spacing unit application that requests the Commission modify order number 535-3, which established an approximate 640-acre drilling and spacing unit covering Section 26, Township 9 North, Range 60 West for the Niobrara Formation. The application seeks to include the Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle formations in the unit and asks that the Commission approve an additional 10 horizontal wells for a total of 11 horizontal wells within the unit. I note that there is an existing horizontal well in this unit that produces from the Niobrara Formation. It's the Kyoto PCLB 26-62HN well. It's API number 05-123-36549. It's located on associated Kyoto PCLB 26-62HN pad. That's location ID 431312. And that well and pad is operated by Noble Energy. The well is not included in this OGDP. As demonstrated in the exhibits supporting the spacing application, the proposed modifications to the spacing unit and proposed unit boundary setbacks do satisfy Rule 305B and the Conservation Act, including the protection of correlative rights. As to the Boydston 3535 pad, as I mentioned, it is an existing location, originally approved for 7 horizontal wells, all of which have been drilled and are producing. The pad would be modified to accommodate the 10 new horizontal wells to develop the 640-acre spacing unit. And the pad is located on fee surface, and Verdad has a surface use agreement with that surface owner. The Boydson 3535 pad does not meet any of the Rule 304 B2B criteria, and therefore an alternative location analysis is not required. While not required, Verdad did evaluate 3 other potential locations to avoid impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. And Verdad did select the Boydson pad as the best of the alternatives because, among other things, it repurposes an existing oil and gas location, which is consistent with the goals of Rule 603E. There are no receptors within 2,000 feet. It is sited outside of high priority habitat. No water resources are impacted, and it was sited with the agreement of the surface owner. The Commission's review is therefore pursuant to Rule 301A. As you'll hear today, Verdad will deploy a suite of best management practices at the location that satisfy Rule 301A, such that these proposed operations will protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, and the environment, and protect against adverse environmental impacts to air, water, soil, and biological resources. Just some of the highlighted BMPs include Tier 4 equivalent engines for drilling and completions, Group 3 drilling mud, electrified production equipment, 3-phase pipeline takeaway, and a tank light facility design, tank vapor recovery design, continuous emissions monitoring, and with respect to wildlife, as I stated, the location is outside of high priority habitat, and CPW has not identified any concerns. Verdad is given proper notice of the application pursuant to Rules 504A and 303E1. No petitions or interventions were received. On June 20th, 2024, the director issued a director recommendation and states that the director has found the application complies with all ECMC rules and recommends a conditional approval. That is, the staff recommended the following condition of approval: that the operator shall submit via Form 4 sundry new reference area pictures taken during the 2024 growing season, and Verdad agrees to that condition of approval. In summary, the application satisfies the Conservation Act and Commission rules with a thoughtfully selected location that repurposes an existing location and disturbance area, prioritizes the avoidance of new disturbance and adverse impacts, will minimize emissions via Tier 4 engines, Group 3 mud, electrified production equipment, and pipeline takeaway, and further employs a suite of best management practices that protect, minimize, and mitigate adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. Verdad respectfully requests that the Commission adopt the Director's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you for.
Is everyone able to see the screen and hear me?
Yes.
Great. Again, my name is Heather Mitchell. I'm the Regulatory Manager for Verdad Resources, and I'm going to discuss the Boydston 3535 pad expansion OGDP application. As Joe mentioned, we also have Jeff Berghorn, our land manager, and Mike Cognetti, the director of EHS&R, on the line to help answer any questions that you may have after the presentation. Today, I'll go through the location overview and development plan, some alternatives, BMPs, benefits of the development, as well as permitting and operational timelines. This slide shows our proposed development plan, and here you can see 2 DSUs. Section 35, Township 9 North, 60 West has already been developed with 7 one-mile laterals. We'll be expanding this pad about 5.5 acres to add 10 additional wells and develop Section 26, Township 9 North, 60 West. We will be developing the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle formations. This will be the final occupation of this pad, and we have existing oil, water, and pipeline infrastructure already in place. This just gives a different overview of the Boydston area. Highlighted in yellow is the minerals that we plan to access, and the Boydston pad is directly south of those minerals. It also shows that why we need 1-mile laterals here, as the area is pretty well developed. This slide is an overview of our surface location. Again, there's a 2.5 mile radius here around the surface location. The developed unit is outlined in red, and our new unit is outlined in blue. Here you can see that we are east of Weld County Road 390 and south of Weld County Road 100. The black diamonds are RBUs, and our nearest RBU is 2,190 feet to the southeast. We're not near any schools or childcare facilities. We're outside of disproportionately impacted communities, and our nearest municipality is the town of New Raymer, which is 15 miles to the southeast. We didn't trigger any surface water receptors, and we're located outside of high priority habitat. In this next slide, we zoom in closer to our proposed location. Here is a 2,000 foot radius around our location, and we'll be developing 1,280 acres from this proposed location. We'll be expanding that existing pad. It has a road already in place, pipeline infrastructure in place, and we're sited away from any RBUs. This area in general is agricultural, and through Weld County, it's zoned as the Ag Rural Planning Area. An ALA wasn't required for ECMC rules, but as mentioned, we did conduct an ALA for Weld County process. And here on this slide, you can see, I'm going to get my little laser pointer. You can see this is our proposed location in yellow, and these yellow lines surrounding these locations are pipelines that are already in place. Their orange circles are 2,000 foot radius around each RBU, and the red squares are alternatives that were reviewed. Alternative 1 is our existing PEGI 2501 pad. It currently has 14 wells already producing, and the Martin 3030 pad has 11 wells on it as well. We also looked at a new pad to the north of the development in section 23. Other things to note on this slide is some high priority habitat around surface water that is outlined in kind of some hatching there, and it is near our PEGI 2501 pad. These next 3 slides will just zoom in around each one of those alternatives. There'll be a 2,000 foot radius around each one, and also an RBU radius around each building. None of the alternatives had any RBUs near them. So again, this is our PEGI 2501 pad. It already has 14 wells producing on this pad. This particular pad was further away from the development area, which makes longer timelines and operational timelines, and a longer step out for development. It's also within high priority habitat and closer to surface water. The next location is our Martin 3030 pad. This particular location is also pretty far away for 1 mile development. It's over 1.5 miles away from the development, so it's not as close as our Boydston pad. It is also within West Greeley Conservation District, and it's closer to high priority habitat. The last location that we looked at was just north of our proposed development area. This particular location would be brand new. It doesn't have existing roads or pipeline infrastructure, and it would be all new disturbance. In addition, we had some concerns related to the drainage from Wild Horse Creek. So our next slide, we zoom into our actual proposed facilities. Facility pad, and here you can see the outline of our current pad, and we'll be expanding to the east to add 10 wells and give our frac crew some good room to operate safely. We could only expand to the east due to existing pipeline on all 3 other sides. This location is again an existing pad with an existing road and existing pipeline infrastructure. We'll have sound walls on the south and the east wall on the east side of the pad to protect our residential building unit owner to the southeast. And again, we're sited outside of high priority habitat, disproportionately impacted communities, and away from RBUs. This will be a tank light facility. We currently have on location 1 oil and 2 water tanks for maintenance purposes. That will not change. We will be changing our compressors from gas-driven compressors to be electrified from line power for this new development. BMPs for this location that we are committed to, or we will be using Group 3 drilling mud. Our drill rig is powered by natural gas generators with battery backup. We have a frac fleet powered by natural gas powered engines, and our compressors will be electrified. For this development, we will be complying with Weld County noise and light thresholds. We're sited away from RBUs, and we'll have sound walls on the south and east side of this pad. And we aren't sited near any surface water, but we will be conducting baseline water sampling as well as secondary containment on all tanks and process vessels. This pad is designed for detention per Weld County regulations. We have robust inspection protocols and remote shut-in capabilities, as well as oil, gas, and water takeaway at the time of production. We did consult with CDPHE on this particular location on May 20th. Most of the BMPs have already been mentioned. We will have some lay flat temporary lines used during completion operations, as well as we'll be using MLVTs in MLVT on location. We also committed to ozone mitigation BMPs for this location, including postponing refueling operations and non-essential operational activities, and also the PFAS BMPs from CDPHE. Some benefits of this development, in addition to utilizing an existing pad that has existing infrastructure, this will be our final occupation of this pad. There is a third-party well in section 26 that will be plugged as part of this development. And we are converting our production equipment to line power. So that reduction in emissions is 5.9 tons per year of VOCs, 4.2 tons per year of NOx, and 13.5 tons per year of CO. Running through our permitting and consultation timelines, you will see that we did have an SUA in place prior from our original pad. We had our Weld County pre-meeting in August and sent out our notifications for the applications in October. We submitted WOGLA and OGDP applications in January of 2024. And we received approval at hearing on April 11th for our WOGLA application. We passed completeness with ECMC in early May, and we had our CDPHE consult on May 20th. We received the director recommendation June 20th, and we are here today at hearing. Upon approval, our planned operational timeline would be to file permits, expand the pad, and set surfaces by Q1 of 2025. We'd be drilling and completing in the middle of 2025, and we should have these wells on production at the end of the year of 2025. So in summary, this location avoids, minimizes, and mitigates impacts to public, environment, and wildlife resources by not being sited near any human, water, or wildlife receptors. We'll also be utilizing existing infrastructure, existing pad, existing roads. We have an agreement in place to reduce our cumulative impacts with that third-party operated well, as well as measurable reduction of VOCs, NOx, and CO from the facility electrification. And we do agree to the COA on this OGDP. We have our reference area photos already taken, and we'll be submitting those upon approval. That's all I have for you today. We appreciate your time and your consideration of this application. Mike, Jeff, and I are on the line to help answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, the panel is open for questions. If we could drop the screen share, we'll be able to see each other. Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to go over a couple clarifying issues. One, I know that for anyone that had been reading through the director recommendation and other things, you now have finalized that there will be produced water takeaway.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. And you talked a little bit about some of the improvements to the production. I think it would be helpful for everyone if you could also go through kind of what your production facility currently looks like, as well as the changes to it, because I know one of the things that wasn't immediately clear was the reduction of some of the tanks and things like that from that takeaway.
Are you talking about from the original 2A versus what we already have a facility set?
The existing facility versus what will end up being the facility.
Okay, and I think if I remember correctly, we have currently 2 water and 1 oil tank, and that is what is currently placed on the pad at this time, and that is what will remain as far as tanks. There will be no change to that. We will have some additional separators because these are 2 units, so they'll have to be separate. But all compressors on location, which are currently gas driven, will be switched to electric line power.
So similar amount of equipment, but it's now going to be electrified to reduce emissions, and there will be additional takeaway compared to what was previously there.
Yes, actually the takeaway is already there. The oil line, water line, and gas line are already in place.
They're all over the place. Okay. That is helpful, and I believe that was my only questions. Thank you.
Others with questions for the panel? Seeing no further questions, does anyone desire to start deliberations and or make a motion? Commissioner Messmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to approve this application with the conditions of approval that are referenced in the director's recommendation.
Second.
Motion and a second for approval. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to the applicant. And let's take 5 and get our staff to tee up the next docket, 2309-00308, and return at 11:19. All right, we are getting ready to proceed. This is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. It is July 10th. It is 11:19. We're all back in the meeting. We will take up docket 2309-00308, an oil and gas development plan. The applicant is GMT Exploration Company, LLC. And I believe in this docket, we have a public comment first, and we would recognize Mr. Howard Boygan.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Nice to see you all. And congratulations, Chair and Commissioner Messner, on your reappointments. I'm Howard Boygan, as you know, resident of Denver, Colorado. I'm an attorney, and I appear today representing the surface owners of the land covered by GMT's pending OGDP application number 230-900-308, the Invicta 3-6528 pad. You'll recall that I appeared before you twice before in recent months in support of 2 Crestone OGDP applications on the same property, which you subsequently approved. My clients, Aurora Highlands LLC and Aurora Tech Center Development LLC, support this additional application, and we urge its speedy approval. We've previously submitted a letter of support that is contained in your application materials. This location, like the previous one, is on the Aurora Energy and Technology Center being developed by my clients. It is part of the Aurora Highlands Master Planned Mixed Use Community in the city of Aurora, south of the airport and east of E470, which is under active development. It will contain some 12,500 homes and 60,000 residents, including the full range of social, cultural, and economic activities and institutions of a thriving community. The Energy and Technology Center, or ATEC, is on the eastern edge of the project. It was acquired and is designed to accommodate energy and other light industrial operations and segregate them from the residential community. I summarized for you previously the extended history of our negotiations with ConocoPhillips and later Crestone regarding the relocation of their planned wells from the heart of the Aurora Highlands project to the ATEC. We undertook a similar process with GMT to relocate their planned well pad to minimize surface impacts and accommodate our surface development. This relocated Invicta pad has been moved from its original location just west of Highway E470 on the western boundary of Aurora Highlands, where it would have literally been on the doorstep of our project and just across the highway from the first phase of the residential development. At our request, GMT agreed to move the location to the ATEC on the east side of our project. GMT has been responsive to our concerns in the location and design of their well pad. As with the Crestone pads, this allowed us to optimize design of the ATEC to integrate oil and gas development with other commercial and light industrial projects and avoid impacting residential development. We negotiated an extensive surface use agreement with GMT, similar to the one we entered into with Crestone. Again, GMT was responsive to our concerns. The director's recommendation recognizes that the relocated pad minimizes surface impacts. The city of Aurora has also been very supportive of this process and of the relocation. I understand that the city has submitted its comments to you and that the city application is currently in phase 2 of the city review process, which is expected to result in an administrative approval. We're not aware of any significant concerns from the city, and I'm not sure whether Mr. Jeffrey Moore, the LGD for the city, and is available to speak. But as I said, he's already submitted his written comments. Under GMT's proposed plan, pad construction will commence in the 3rd quarter of this year, and wells will be drilled in the 4th quarter, completions finished by the 1st quarter of 2025. This is critical from my client's standpoint because it will precede surface development in the ATEC. Therefore, we urge the commission to grant approval of this application so that the city permit can be finalized and drilling can begin as soon as possible to meet this schedule. Finally, I just want to comment that this project, like the Crestone pads, shows how surface owners, lessees, and mineral owners can come together and work through complex challenges to accommodate their respective concerns and minimize impacts on all stakeholders. We extend our appreciation to GMT and to the regulators, both state and local, for working with us to bring this project to a successful conclusion. And that ends my remarks. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you for the remarks, Mr. Borgen. We appreciate your being with us and providing that perspective. Does anyone have questions of Mr. Borgen? All right, seeing none, we'll let you go. And again, appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right. My agenda has Kevin Fletcher from ECMC Location Assessment Specialist as going next. Mr. Fletcher?
Hello, commissioners. Can you hear and see me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. My name is Kevin Fletcher, and I am the lead location assessment specialist for the GMT Invicta OGDP. I'm here to make a statement regarding an issue with the public comment left for this OGDP by the relevant local government, the city of Aurora. Due to this glitch, this public comment was not recorded to the Form 2A during the public comment period. Because of this, the director's recommendation states that there were no public comments submitted on the Form 2A. This was brought to our attention by Jeffrey Moore with the city of Aurora and the provided public comments. The comment was forwarded to you by the hearings unit for review. I have reached out to Jeffrey Moore to explain the situation. Unfortunately, by the time we became aware of this, the director's recommendation had already been published and no additional changes could be made to the Form 2A at that point. I am able to add this comment manually as part of the post-hearing processing of this form if the commission approves, so that this comment by the City of Aurora is properly documented as part of this OGDP. This does not change the determination of the director's recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we will now recognize Ms. Wazelinski and her witnesses who will now be sworn in.
Thank you, Chair. We have 5 witnesses from GMT. If you could all please be on video.
Good morning to the members of the panel. I will go one at a time and ask you each to raise your right hand, state your name, that you swear to tell the truth. I will begin with Mr. Blair.
My name is Maxwell Blair, Regulatory Manager for GMT, and I swear I will tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Gross.
My name is Andrea Gross. I'm the president and owner of Upstream Petroleum Management, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Heeker.
I'm Sarah Hager. I'm the geologist at GMT, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Schuster.
My name is Hans Schuster. I'm the land manager here at GMT, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Snow. Oh, please unmute.
I'm Dennis Snow, VP of Operations at GMT. I promise to tell the truth.
Thank you.
All right, witnesses are sworn in. The floor is yours, Ms. Wazelinski.
Thank you, Chair. We'll get our PowerPoint up and then I will get started. I think we just need that in presentation mode. Perfect. Andrea, we can see the next slide. I'm not sure if you can switch the view to just single slide.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Nope.
One of the previous applicants presented first, then shared the screen that had the presentation on it.
There we go.
There you go.
That better? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning again, commissioners. My name is Kelsey Wazelinski with Jost Energy Law. And with Jamie Jost, we represent GMT Exploration in the Invicta 36528 OGDP before you today in docket 2309-00308. I would like to thank Mr. Boygan for his comments today, and both Aurora Highlands and the City of Aurora for their participation and support through the OGDP and local permit process, and also ECMC staff and the director for their efforts on this OGDP. We also appreciate the commissioner question we received yesterday, and we will address this in the presentation today. Next slide. I'll take just a few minutes to summarize the Invicta OGDP and requested relief before I turn it over to GMT. This OGDP requests that the Commission establish an approximate 1,920 acre drilling and spacing unit to develop 8 new horizontal wells in the Niobrara Formation. The Invicta OGDP also requests that the Commission approve 1 new Form 2A for the new Invicta 36528 pad for the development of 8 new horizontal wells. The Invicta OGDP is located within the City of Aurora. The location was approved by the Aurora Planning and Zoning Commission after a public hearing on March 13th of 2024. Phase 2 of the City of Aurora permitting process is currently underway, and GMT expects administrative approval of the location in September of this year. The OGDP does not trigger any Rule 304 ALA criteria, and specifically the proposed location is over 2,000 feet from residential building units and high occupancy building units, over 2,000 feet from all schools and childcare centers, and not within any high priority habitat. As indicated by Mr. Boygan, Aurora Highlands is the surface owner of the location and supports the OGDP, and specifically how the location harmonizes with the planned surface development. In addition, the proposed Invicta location is within the approved Box Elder cap operated by Crestone Peak, but the mineral development area is entirely outside of the cap. GMT and Civitas have been in close communication regarding the proposed development, and Civitas submitted a letter of support for the Invicta OGDP early on in the permitting process. As part of the Invicta OGDP, GMT has committed to several BMPs to avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential adverse impacts, which GMT will describe today. These include a commitment to an electric drilling rig pending Excel construction timelines. And should there be an issue with the infrastructure upgrade, GMT commits to using a Tier 4 equivalent rig, Tier 4 or equivalent engines for completions, Group 3 drilling mud, and oil and gas takeaway. And finally, GMT has complied with all notice requirements for the Invicta OGDP. No formal petitions were filed, and no public comments were submitted on the Form 2A. We would like to acknowledge, however, the City of Aurora comments that were submitted in the record here just a few weeks ago. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Schuster, Land Manager for GMT, to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Mr. Boygan. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Hans Schuster, the Land Manager for GMT Exploration LLC. GMT appreciates this opportunity to present the Invicta OGDP to the Commission today. GMT will present a variety of topics regarding the Invicta OGDP and seeks your approval of this application. We'd first like to thank the ECMC staff and the Director for their efforts on this OGDP. We'd also like to thank the City of Aurora and its Oil and Gas Manager, Jeffrey Moore, and his staff for their participation throughout the permitting process, and Aurora Highlands for attending and providing comments in support of this development plan. GMT has appreciated working with both the city and Aurora Highlands and looks forward to continued collaboration on our development progress. Next slide, please. GMT Exploration Company is a privately held independent oil and gas company operating in the DJ Basin. Myself, Ms. Waslenki, and Mr. Maxwell Blair will present the Invicta OGDP application. We also have GMT subject matter experts available for any questions from the Commission. Next slide, please. The Invicta oil and gas location is located in Section 28, Township 3 South, Range 65 West, approximately 1.5 miles from the drilling and spacing unit, and will be used to develop 8 horizontal wells for the development of the Niobrara Formation. The Invicta location did not meet any Rule 304B2 criteria. No residential buildings or schools are within 2,000 feet, and the closest residence is over 7,200 feet away. The location is not high priority habitat. GMT has a surface use agreement with the landowner, and the location is zoned airport district designated for industrial use only by the city. And with that, I'll now turn the presentation over to Max Blair.
Good morning, Commission. Thank you so much for your time. And again, thank you to Howard Boygan for your comments today as well. As you can see on the slide on the screen, we're presenting a bit of the permitting timeline for your background. We began our process with the city in July of 2023, about a year ago. We've been working through the city's permit process under their oil and gas manual, and we filed our OGDP with ECMC in September of 2023. As has been noted, we've received a letter of support from both Civitas, the adjacent proximate operator in the area, and from Aurora Highlands, the property owner with whom we have a surface use agreement. We received our OGDP completeness determination in April 24, and we had the 30-day public comment notice end in May, and the public comments from Aurora have now been entered into the record. And here we are on July 10th for our hearing. Next slide, please. So let me speak a little bit about the location. This has already been mentioned by the property owner representative, but I believe this project, this OGDP, represents a very good collaboration between the property owner and developer in the area, us as an operator, the city, and other operators in the area to select this location to harmonize with the surface development that's planned for the area, work within the zoning designated by the city of Aurora, and utilize technologies in the industry to allow us to access the minerals that we plan to develop. On the right side of the screen, you can see a shot of the letter of support we received from Aurora Highlands. Next slide, please. Additionally, as I've mentioned, we have a letter of support from Civitas, an adjacent operator. And as has already been mentioned, although the surface location is within the Box Elder Cap, the mineral development is outside of the Box Elder Cap, and there shouldn't be any conflict or interference with their development. Next slide, please. Lastly, covering the Aurora permitting process, we had our pre-application meeting back in July of 23, almost a year ago. Submitted the phase 1 components of our application in October, held our neighborhood meeting in February. That meeting was advertised to all property owners within a mile and any registered neighborhood organizations in that area as well. We had essentially one member of the public attend. Their comments were supportive. They had a few questions about the project. We also had representatives from the city, the landowner and developer for the area, and the project team. We had a good Q&A session, and we've generated a summary of that meeting and provided it to the city as part of the permitting process. This project received approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission at public hearing in March of 2024. And if you're unfamiliar with the city's process, there's a typical call-up period by city council that elapsed about a month or so after the approval. So we've gone through the public hearing process in Aurora. We're now currently in phase 2, and we are expecting an approval from the city in September potentially for the permit. Next slide, please. To address those concerns with regard to air, there's potential from dust and fugitive emissions from development, public health and welfare. There's potential for impacts related to traffic and visual and noise impacts particularly during the initial development phases. And of course, wildlife and soil and water resources are a potential concern in oil and gas development. Next slide, please. So we have a number of BMPs planned for the site. Many of them have become standard practice for the industry in Colorado, but I'll highlight a few. Our plan is to have both an oil and gas pipeline in place for the initial development of these wells, which will greatly reduce the impact of oil trucking from development. We do have a number of technologies planned within the facility to monitor the location, and we will have air quality monitoring around the site. Aurora also has air quality monitoring set up within their boundaries, so we'll be hearing from Aurora on any issues that might arise as well. As was already mentioned, site selection was a key mitigation for this project. We are not just 2,000 feet from any nearby RBU, but approximately 7,200 feet from the nearest occupied building. And that should mitigate impacts significantly, that distance. As mentioned, we'll have an oil pipeline in place. And then lastly, touching on soil and water resources, we have stormwater management plans in place that comply with both the state and the city requirements to ensure that the impacts from this development will be minimized, mitigated, and managed effectively. Next slide, please. I'll mention that we conducted our CDPHE consultation on May 8th, and the results of that consultation have been entered into the Form 2A. We are intending to use an electric drilling rig. We've been working with Xcel Energy on that request for over a year. I believe our initial contact with them occurred in April of 2023. And we're also coordinating those efforts with the adjacent operator and developer in the area to ensure that Xcel can meet these power demands. If we're unable to get the power in time for our development schedule, we will use Tier 4 equivalent engines on the site. And we also do plan to use Group 3 drilling mud to reduce potential for odor emissions from the drilling muds. And there will be a LAC system and pipeline takeaway capacity for oil production. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Hans Schuster again, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Max. Just going to take a few minutes to describe the sworn testimony submitted in support of the OGDP and spacing applications. The spacing application submitted with the OGDP requests to establish an approximate 1,920 acre drilling and spacing unit for the development and operation of 8 horizontal wells in the Niobrara Formation. GMT submitted detailed land testimony and exhibits illustrating that GMT has majority leasehold interest in the proposed drilling and spacing unit for the development and operation of the wells. There are federal minerals within the application lands, comprised of a very small tract in the southeast quarter of Section 26, Township 3 South, Range 66 West. GMT has submitted a federal communitization agreement to the BLM and anticipates its approval prior to the date of first production from the initial well drilled in the unit. In addition, ECMC staff indicated in the director recommendation that staff appreciates the utilization of a single large DSU for these application lands, eliminating the need for multiple individual wellbore spacing units. Next slide, please. GMT also submitted a detailed geologic testimony and exhibits to support the applications. The geology exhibits show that the Niobrara Formation is present throughout the application lands, is approximately 300 to 325 feet thick, and is both a hydrocarbon source rock and a reservoir. Next slide, please. Finally, GMT submitted detailed engineering testimony and exhibits to support the OGDP and spacing application. The proposed 1,920 acre drilling and spacing unit is sufficient to be efficiently, effectively, and economically drained by 8 horizontal wells in the Niobrara Formation. The testimony showed that the average draining radius would not extend beyond the requested subsurface setbacks, preventing waste and protecting relative rights while remaining economic. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Wozniacki to conclude the presentation.
Thank you, Hans. So to summarize the Invicta OGDP and GMT's request for approval, we'll note the following highlights. No petitions were filed to the OGDP, and both Aurora Highlands and Civitas submitted letters in support. The City of Aurora permitting process is well underway, with Phase 2 expected to conclude in the coming months, and the city supports the OGDP development. The Invicta OGDP provides substantial protections of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources by siting outside of sensitive receptors. The best management practices avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential temporary impacts. And finally, the director recommendation concludes that the ECMC staff does not anticipate any significant potential direct adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. Next slide. This slide just again shows the relief requested for the Invicta OGDP. We respectfully request your approval, and this does conclude our presentation. So we can take the PowerPoint down, and we have a team of witnesses who are open to your questions.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, we have a panel that is open for questions, if anyone has questions. Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask some clarifying questions here and confirm some information. Number one, I wanted to confirm the dates that you had on there for the proposed phases of operation, the drilling, the construction, et cetera. Based on that, all drilling and completions will take place outside of the ozone season. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay. And do you also talk a little bit about the layout of what you're trying to do here? Specifically, was hoping to get a little bit more information. The pad size, it seemed a little big for the number of wells, the number of tanks, that kind of stuff. Could you go over that a little bit more, please?
Yeah, happy to. The pad design, I guess it is typical for our operations to have a pad of that size to support the drilling completions operations. The rig required to develop wells such as these with a long reach, and the equipment that goes with it can be a little bit longer. There's more drill pipe and other things that are required on the site. So we've, the pad design has gone through a process both at the ECMC and the city of Aurora, and it meets with the surface use agreement that we have with the developer. There will be a reduction in pad size, but some of the acreage listed there in on the final interim reclamation, that does include some topsoil piles and other elements that will be part of screening of the site from view from future development as well.
Okay. And can you confirm the number of tanks that are going to be on location?
We have 8 tanks total planned for production operations, 6 for oil and 2 for water.
And so that is taken into account that you are going to have the oil and gas takeaway. You're still going to have the 8 tanks there.
That's correct. Yeah, the oil tanks serve a number of functions, having some retention time on site for oil to pass through those tanks and stabilize, can improve performance on delivery into the pipeline. So we have a tank, a facility designed with tanks included.
And so that's to make sure that you're going to meet the specifications of the midstream operator.
Correct.
Okay.
I will mention that those tanks will have vapor recovery, just like the majority of new development sites in the state today. We'll have a VRT, VRU, and a combustor on site that should capture and destroy emissions related to tanks in the facility.
And can you just go into a little bit more detail as well as on efforts on water takeaway, produced water takeaway?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start by mentioning that the expected water production from these wells is relatively low. We've analyzed adjacent horizontal wells in the same formation. There's been development in this area now for several years, and this part of the Niobrara has relatively low water production. That combined with the fact that there's no existing produced water infrastructure in the area, and the nearest disposal well is that we utilize is approximately 37 miles away. Constructing a water pipeline for takeaway would be cost prohibitive and have a very limited impact on the overall impact of the development, we believe. Once initial flowback concludes and these wells move into production operations, we're premising very low water production over the life of the project.
And given that this location is within the Box Elder cap, I'm curious if you've also spoken to Civitas about potentially using their planned water takeaway efforts at all.
I don't know to what extent we've had discussions with Civitas, but certainly if the potential arises in the future for access to any water infrastructure, I don't believe any exists today, but if it's constructed and access is possible for GMT, it's certainly a discussion we'd be willing to have.
Okay. And then my final 2 questions. Number 1, I know there's going to be some federal minerals here. Have you had any kind of input, any concerns expressed from BLM about the federal minerals being developed?
I'm going to ask our land manager, Hans Schuster, to respond to that question.
We've actually been working with the BLM for, I think, about 5 years on this project. Our original DSU was across the highway, as Mr. Borgen explained, and there's a small beacon location from the old Stapleton Airport. That's 0.83 acres. It's on the very southern unit boundary. It's within the setback, so it will not be penetrated. We actually have an approved compensatory royalty agreement in place, and we have submitted, we expect a federal communization agreement in the next several weeks. So yeah, we've spoken with them for several years now, and they have no issues.
And then final question, again, with this, I know one of the things that we dealt with when we did the box elder cap was having the discussions around the operator agreement that Aurora had reached with Civitas. Do you guys have a similar operator agreement with the city of Aurora?
That's a great question, Commissioner. So GMT does not have an operator agreement with the city of Aurora. Those operator agreements were all put in place prior to their current structure in the city of Aurora to manage oil and gas development. They established the energy department within the city and developed what they call the oil and gas manual. And that is the process that our application is following through the city. So the oil and gas manual carries quite a few similar requirements for submittal and documentation and agreements with the city as the operator agreements, but it is slightly different than those individual operator agreements that are still in force.
Thank you. And I do apologize. I lied about that being my last question. Just to clarify again, you said you're expecting the final approval from Aurora in September?
That's correct. Yeah, the oil and gas manual breaks the process into 2 phases. We have concluded phase 1, which resulted in a public hearing, which granted unanimous approval of the location. Phase 2 is intended to address final details, if you will, on various plans and agreements that the operator enters into with the city. We've been working with the city quite closely on sort of resolving any outstanding issues, and we're highly confident that we'll be successful in that and secure an administrative approval from the city. As we mentioned, it's currently premised in September.
Thank you.
Others with questions, Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. One, I want to follow up on one of Commissioner Cross's questions, because it's still not clear to me, understanding we're in the ozone non-attainment area. And I think, Mr. Blair, you made a comment that the majority of new sites, have a similar tank configuration to what you're proposing here. And that's not been my experience. Most new sites have significantly less tanks, and understanding that tanks are certainly a potential air impact. Help me understand the need for this many tanks, because this is, to me, it's unusual to have this many tanks, particularly in a situation where you have oil takeaway.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think I'm going to ask one of my panelists to provide a little more information on the purpose of the tanks and how they'll be operated. So Dennis Snow, if you wouldn't mind unmuting your computer and addressing the question.
Thanks. Thanks, Max. Thanks for the question. The Max hit on those points. As we have specifications to meet these to ship the oil off to our provider. In order to meet those specifications, we have to have this settling time in those tanks to get the specifications met to ship it on down the road. So depending on how you design your system, you can reduce tanks, but with this particular provider we're sending our oil to, we have to have the retention time to meet the oil specs to send it down the line.
Are you taking any additional steps on these tanks to ensure that vapor is being recovered and piped versus destructed?
Max hit on that earlier. We're going to have all the standard or the vapor recovery units on the tanks. We'll have a VRU, and so we should be able to capture all those emissions and then combust them in a combustor.
And the VRU will, anything we can put into the gas pipeline will be put into the gas pipeline. That's the first pass, but anything that cannot, for whatever reason, low volumes, low concentration, very low pressures, they'll be directed to a combustor.
Correct.
Okay, it seems like this is a, well, I'll just leave it at that right now. I do have a couple other questions. So the BMP that you've actually committed to on the Form 2A is different than the BMP that you've indicated that you're committing to here today regarding drilling rigs. The BMP on the Form 2A talks about the use of electric drilling rigs if available and will demonstrate best effort if unable to utilize them, which I was going to have heartburn with. Now, what I'm hearing you say today is that you will use electric drilling rigs, and if not, you will utilize a Tier 4 equivalent, which would be something like natural gas rig with battery backup, understanding that dual fuel is not Tier 4 equivalent. Is that what I'm hearing?
I apologize, going back through our presentation, sure that I have the language correct. I have the 2A up, and the language in the 2A is essentially the standard language that CDPHE.
Well, that's not actually right. I mean, CDPHE's standard language is that you'll commit to Tier 4 equivalent. And this is unusual language that actually doesn't say anything. It just says that you will try to use an electric rig, and if not, you can use whatever else you want.
And Commissioner Messer, I'm happy to add a little support here. I think I can clarify that if the infrastructure upgrade is not in place to use the electric rig, it is a commitment to a Tier 4 equivalent rig.
Okay. That was my question. And so I will ask for a condition of approval or to include that as a BMP, just to clarify that on the 2A. Ms. Wazilingi, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. And then my last question is, wonder if you could talk, I understand this is in an industrial zone, and I think it's an appropriate siting of the facility, although you've also asked for exemptions from noise and light plans. I'm assuming that most local governments, and I'm assuming that the city of Aurora, even in industrial areas, do have light and noise standards associated with their permitting process. And was there plans that were submitted as part of the city of Aurora process that discussed lighting and noise?
Certainly there are, and I don't recall any concerns being raised by the city regarding light or noise for development in this area. That we are proximate to Denver Airport, which generates quite a bit of noise and light both, and the zoning for this site is industrial in part because of the noise influence zone of the airport itself. So I think that I'll leave it at that no concerns were raised by the city, and our application location has been approved with the proposed mitigations for the overall project.
Thanks for that. I was really asking the question just as a point that, while certainly you have the ability to ask for light and noise exemptions, through our process, there's also a process for substantially equivalent information being provided from a local government process. And if there were plans that were submitted as part of that local government process, it is possible for you to submit those plans as part of our process as substantially equivalent. And I just encourage you to do that rather than just ask for an exemption, because I think it also aids in giving an overall picture of what's being proposed here and allows us to better tie the local government process together with the state process. understanding that in the state process, even with an exemption, you're still bound by our noise standards that are incorporated in our rules, even without the submittal of a noise mitigation plan. So it was more of an FYI, if they did require that can be submitted as substantially equivalent.
I appreciate the comment. We'll incorporate that into any future applications.
So, I don't have any further questions, Mr. Chair.
Other commissioners with questions? Seeing none, I believe we move into deliberations. Any commissioner desire to initiate deliberations and or make a motion?
I can initiate deliberations. I'm happy to make a motion as well. I think the siting of this site is in an appropriate place. I appreciate former Commissioner Boygan providing testimony to that. I think the local government has also agreed that the siting of this is appropriate. I think having the clarity on the utilization of either electric rig or a Tier 4 equivalent was going to be an important point for me, but I think that created some clarity in that situation. I would encourage to continue to look at ways to minimize tanks, as this is actually a unique situation now where we see this many tanks on location, and it is not the norm by any means. I know that there are ways to be able to utilize less tanks and still meet takeaway requirements. Other operators, I think, have figured it out, and it's not tied to our rules. I'm not tying it to our rules, but I'm actually just saying that I think that there are opportunities to look at ways to utilize less tanks on site. But other than that, I would move to approve this application with the inclusion of the condition of approval that the operator will use electric drill rigs if possible, and if available, and otherwise use Tier 4 equivalent drilling rigs in their operations.
Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Messner, for leading off. I want to reiterate what Commissioner Messner said. I do appreciate the work done with respect to siting to make sure that this is away from the future development that is planned. I also think it's important as part of the development timeline that the drilling and completion operations are scheduled to take place outside of the ozone season. I think that's also something that's helpful in terms of trying to meet our goals across the state here. And I also do want to reiterate that I was also a little taken aback by the number of tanks, given that there is soil takeaway. I do appreciate that meeting specifications for midstream operators, especially for some of the smaller to mid-sized operators, can be difficult at times, and so understand the efforts to do it. I do agree that operators should be encouraged to take efforts to reduce those tanks. I do recognize that they are using VRUs and other equipment to try and minimize any amount that has to be combusted. But it's always better if we can get it directly into the pipeline without having to do that. But that said, I do agree that this is an approvable application. I would second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. My points were also engine types and number of tanks, and they were adequately addressed by Commissioner Messner. I wanted to just reiterate that and state my support for the COA that he's asked for on the clarification of engine types, and am also in support of the motion.
As am I. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, let's take one more 5-minute break before we take up our last OGDP. Let's return at 12. 11. There we go. All right, we are back on the record with the Carbon and Energy Management Commission on July 10th. It is 12:12. We were taking up the final docketed matter, docket number 2402-0052, an oil and gas development plan proposed by the applicant Bison 4 Operating LLC. We will first hear from Jason Maxey, Director and Local Government Designee with Weld County's Energy Department.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you once again for the opportunity to speak with you for a few minutes regarding Weld County's 1041 WOGLA process, and in particular, this OGDP in front of you right now, which is the Bison 4 Operating Fiscus 23 permit. Again, my name is Jason Maxey with the Weld County Oil and Gas Energy Department, and I'll just go through a few high-level bullet points regarding the docket item in front of you. We held our pre-application meeting for the Fiscus 23 location at the beginning of this year, January 3rd, 2024. At that pre-application meeting, through a lot of discussion with Weld County staff, Bison staff, ECMC staff, and CDPHE staff, we did discuss several alternatives at that pre-app meeting. CPW and BLM were invited as well, but they did not attend that meeting. Regardless, as we always do, all invitees and attendees to our pre-app meetings receive a copy of our official meeting minutes, and so they did receive those. We have assigned a 1041 WOGLA number, which is 24-0001 for this location. And we received the initial application March 5th of this year. However, there was some dialogue with Bison back and forth to clarify certain items and to get a few things amended, and the final version, which we reviewed and which is a part of our record, was submitted on May 6th of 2024. Within the application, there was the official analysis of 4 alternative sites, which were reviewed and discussed in detail with staff throughout the review process leading up to our hearing. There are no Weld County building units defined within the 1041 WOGLA zone. We did send notice of our hearing to 6 property owners, 6 parcels. And out of those 6 parcels, there were 5 individual property owners that received notice. There was 1 duplicate. We did not receive any requests to participate in the hearing, and we didn't receive any public comments from either the individuals that received notice or from referral parties that we sent referral requests to, being other agencies that would have interest in this item. The 1041 hearing for this location was held June 27th, so fairly recently. The hearing officer considered testimony at that hearing from not only Weld County staff, but also from Bison staff members as well. And at that hearing, the hearing officer reviewed and discussed those 4 alternate sites with the applicant. And the ultimate site, being the Fiscus 23, was determined to be the best location from Weld County's perspective. The application was found to ultimately be compliant and complete with Weld County code requirements, and the hearing officer subsequently approved that permit. The final order has been recorded with the Weld County Clerk and Recorder, and it was noticed actually today in today's paper, July 10th, 2024. So our process has been fully complete as of today's publishing in the paper. The approved permit, as you all know, is valid for 3 years from Weld County, and construction needs to commence within that time frame, or else they need to request an extension from us. We have reviewed and agree with all their best management practices that were contained within our application, and we believe that the presented application will promote and protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents of Weld County, as well as the environment and wildlife. We believe this is a good location from a land use perspective. And 2A comments were submitted to you all on May 22nd, so those are included in the director's recommendation. We have received the director's recommendation. We've read through it. We don't have any questions about that. And with all that being said, we just would like to finish up by saying we don't have any further questions or comments regarding this, and we agree with the director's recommendation for approval, and we would support that recommendation. Thank you as always, and happy to answer any questions.
You're muted.
Mission.
Oh.
Thanks, Mr. Maxey. I'm not seeing folks with questions. We appreciate Weld County's perspective. Thank you very much. And we will now turn to Ms. Wazlinki and your witnesses who will be sworn in by Hearings Manager Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. We have 3 witnesses from Bison. They're all on.
Thank you. I'll call on each of you, and if you wouldn't mind raising your right hand, stating your name and that you swear to tell the truth. We will start with Ms. Gillen.
Kate Gillen, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan.
Ian Hogan, swear to tell the truth.
And finally, Mr. Meyer.
Ben Meyer, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you very much.
All right, Ms. Wazlinki, the video panel is yours.
Thank you. We'll get our PowerPoint up and I will get started. Wonderful. Well, good afternoon again, Commissioners. My name is Kelsey Wazlinki with Jost Energy Law, and with Jamie Jost, we represent Bison 4 Operating LLC in the Fiscus 23 OGDP before you today in docket 2402-00052. We would like to thank Mr. Maxey and Weld County for their support and participation in the WOGLA process for the Fiscus 23 OGDP, and also ECMC staff and the director for their efforts. We also appreciate the 2 questions we received from the Commissioner. 23 OGDP, Bison has committed to several BMPs to avoid, mitigate, and minimize potential adverse impacts, which Bison will describe today. To highlight a few, Bison is planning on an electric rig for drilling, and Bison will talk a little more about that. And no public comments were received on the Form 2A. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie Gillen to continue the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present our application. We appreciate your time and attention. My name is Katie Gillen. I am the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and VHS at Bison, and joining me as panel members today are Ian Hogan, Bison's Vice President of Exploration and Geology, and Bennett Meyer, Land Manager at Bison. Bison is a Colorado-owned and operated company, and we are proud to be one of the largest private equity companies in the DJ Basin. We operate approximately 400 wells in the DJ. Our team possesses extensive expertise in Colorado operations, and we are committed to achieving operational excellence, minimizing our environmental footprint, and ensuring safe and responsible operations. Slide. This slide includes a summary of our Weld County, ECMC, and BLM permitting timelines. Our 1041 WOGLA pre-application meeting was held on January 3rd, 2024. ECMC, CDPHE, BLM, and the County Planning Department expressed no opposition to our proposed location. CPW was invited but did not participate. However, the location and access road are wholly outside of high priority habitat. The 1041 WOGLA was approved at hearing on June 27th. There was no public comment received. Bison obtained our director's recommendation for approval of our OGDP on June 4th. And there was also no public comment received on our OGDP application. The only federal minerals that will be developed in this OGDP will consist of 8 federal wells that will be developed in sections 23 and 24. Bison has submitted our 8 federal APDs to BLM on March 7th. The surface location is on private fee surface, and the location will develop both fee and federal minerals. Next slide. The Fiscus 23 OGDP contains a single surface location, the Fiscus 23 pad, and it is located in rangeland in a remote area of unincorporated eastern Wells County, just east of the town of Keota and approximately 8.5 miles north of the town of Rainer. Slide. The OGDP contains a single surface location where we will develop all wells in a single 2,240 acre DSU. The total disturbed area during construction will consist of 20.7 acres of new surface disturbance, and the size of the location after interim reclamation will be 10.4 acres. The access road will be 2 miles, and we will utilize existing 2-track road. There will be 15 horizontal wells and all associated production equipment located here. Bison will have oil, gas, and produced water pipeline from the location. We have received the commissioner's request to provide further detail regarding the number of tanks and the intended purpose of each tank. Bison has proposed 4 oil tanks and 4 produced water tanks to service the first 15 wells, which Bison intends to develop in a single occupation. Our reasons for needing the requested number of tanks to handle our oil versus other parts of the DJ Basin include the following reasons. Bison's crude oil is thicker than the DJ core. Our API gravity ranges from 36 to 38 versus DJ core gravity, which is closer to 50 API. As a result, the oil has a higher viscosity and paraffin deposition, increasing the content of formation water, salt content, and corrosion issues compared to higher API gravity oil in the DJ core. Bison's crude requires heat, chemical, and residence time to break the emulsion to get crude oil separated from the water in order to meet our pipeline specifications. There are times when the well or separator conditions change and emulsions remain, causing water to be suspended in the oil and out of pipeline specification. In this case, the oil is automatically rejected to a reject tank, where it is then recycled through the oil polisher, also known as a heater treater, until the water content can be sufficiently dropped to meet our pipeline specifications. These specifications include a basic sediment and water specification. These are typically elements like sand, paraffin, dirt, and water. Oil sold and sent down the pipeline must meet these agreed upon contractual quality standards, or the oil is rejected from the LACT. Additionally, we have temperature specifications we're also required to meet. The tanks allow for additional residence time for cooling to meet those temperature specifications. The crude is produced into the settling tanks, and then the excess water is pumped out of the tanks before the crude oil is sold through the LACT into the pipeline. Bison utilizes a recycle pump to remove the excess water that separates from the crude and the oils in the settling tank. In addition, the LACT unit is equipped with a meter that tests the crude oil quality and returns off-spec oil to tanks for additional treatment, which prevents out-of-spec oil from being sold. These tanks are required to ensure normal operations and achieve pipeline specifications. In addition, these tanks are equipped in order to minimize any impacts associated with these tanks. We equip them with tank vapor control technology. That technology captures 100% of tank vapors during normal operations. Additionally, these tanks are also equipped with auto gauging technology, which eliminates the need for manual tank gauging and opening the feed hatches, thereby reducing emissions. Additionally, with respect to the produced water tanks, Bison utilizes the produced water tanks in a similar fashion for rejected produced water that fails to meet pipeline specifications. The produced water tanks allow additional residence time for the produced water to cool in order to meet those temperature specifications. Additionally, I would note Bison implements a modernized flowback design, which allows us to direct our flowback directly to the production facility instead of having to stage temporary flowback tanks on site. This modernized flowback method further reduces our emissions by the added benefit of that vapor recovery technology we discussed before. And these produced water tanks allow us to manage that flowback volume to achieve this enhanced BMP. Hope I've addressed your questions regarding the tanks. I'll just continue forward with an overview of the location. I'll just highlight here that no ALA criteria is applicable to this location. Therefore, an alternative location siting analysis is not required. Next. The mineral lands that will be developed include all of sections 23, 24, 25, and the north half of section 26. There will be a total of 15 wells running north to south. There will be 7 1.5-mile laterals and 8 2-mile laterals. Federal minerals will be developed in sections 23 and 24. Slide. This cultural features map shows the remoteness of the location and how the site avoids all applicable cultural features and ALA criteria. There are no residential building units, schools, or childcare facilities within 2,000 feet of the pad. It is not within a floodplain, and there are no nearby sensitive water receptors. Additionally, it is outside of high priority habitat. Slide. Overview of our haul route. The haul route will have 100% of traffic running south on Weld County Road 127, which turns to 127.5, and 129 on to Highway 14. This route and access road avoids residential areas, schools, and childcare facilities. Additionally, to reduce traffic, Bison implements following BMPs, including oil, gas, and produced water pipeline, along with production automation that allow us to remotely monitor our production operations. This all significantly reduces the traffic to the location. Bison evaluated and considered key cultural and environmental features to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts when selecting the Fiscus 23 location and access road. As such, none of the 304-2B2 alternative location siting analysis criteria apply to the location, and no siting analysis is required. As noted by Director Maxey, during the Weld County pre-application meeting, 3 alternative locations were reviewed. None were identified as offering meaningful reduction in impacts or operational benefits in comparison to the proposed location. Again, I will just highlight here, there are no residential building units, schools, or childcare facilities within 2,000 feet of the location. It is outside of high priority habitat. There is no disproportionately impacted community within 2,000 feet of the location. Additionally, the selected surface location minimizes drainage and topographical challenges. We also have an executed surface use agreement with the landowner. Next slide. Pending all required permit approvals, Bison's estimated operational timeline will be commencing construction in August of 2024. Drilling will commence in October, completions in January, and we anticipate production March of 2025. Bison plans to fully develop the DSU in a single occupation, and I will note that drilling will occur outside of the ozone season. Bison has included best-in-class management practices to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts during the drilling and completions. And I will highlight some listed here. We also received questions from the commissioners regarding clarification on our use of an electric drill rig and Tier 4 engines for completions. Bison is planning to utilize an electric drill rig to reduce combustion emissions. However, if we are unable to obtain the necessary power in time to operate the drill rig, we will utilize a CNG dual fuel engine with battery assist. I will also note all drilling and completions will occur outside of ozone season, and Bison will meet our NOx intensity targets. Additionally, Bison will use Group 2 drilling mud, which has a reduced emissions profile, shortens drilling time, and therefore time on location, which further minimizes our drilling emissions. Fresh water will be delivered to the location via lay flat lines and stored on site via an NLBT, thereby reducing truck traffic from freshwater hauling. Next slide. Best management practices to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts during the production phase include those listed on the slide. And to highlight here, again, Bison will have oil, gas, and produced water pipeline takeaway at first production. This significantly reduces truck traffic and on-site storage. Pneumatic controllers will be operated on instrument air, eliminating those associated emissions. We'll have continuous monitoring during drilling and completions and the first 6 months of production. Additionally, we will have utility line power at the facility to operate the production equipment, and all compression will be electrified. But we've included a slide here regarding wildlife. I will note again that the location and access road are outside of high priority habitat. Bison did complete a biological survey during our process of permitting the location. No sensitive habitat species was identified. CPW did not identify any impacts to high priority habitat and had no referral comments provided during the WOGA application. Bison, however, is implementing the following BMPs to reduce impacts to wildlife. This includes our quiet frac fleet, which reduces noise, and we will also develop the DSU in a single occupation. Next slide. In conclusion, there was no opposing public comment received on our OGDP. We have received approval of our Weld County permit. And just to highlight here, director's recommendation and staff highlights include, there was no alternative location siting analysis applies to the location, and impacts to public health, safety, and welfare will be largely avoided, minimized, and/or mitigated by the successful implementation of Bison site-specific BMPs included in our application. Based on the siting of the Fiscus 23 location, potential impacts to water resources are not anticipated. CPW did not communicate any wildlife concerns. Additionally, I'd like to state here, Bison will agree to the 2 COAs outlined in the director recommendation and noted on this slide. Next slide. This slide here shows our requested relief and concludes our presentation, and the Bison team is now available for any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, once again, we have a panel that is available for questions. Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a little bit of a technical question. I appreciate the BMPs that are being proposed here. I think they're extensive and good quality BMPs, and it's actually BMPs that you're proposing without a CDPHE consultation, which I think is excellent. However, without the CDPHE consultation, I'm not sure that the BMPs that you're committing to are actually in the Form 2A. And so I'm not sure how to technically handle that, because there was a number of BMPs, including your commitment to, certain drilling rigs and Tier 4 engines and so on and so forth. But I can't find those anywhere in the 2A. And typically, I think the location assessment specialist pulls those from a CDPHE consultation, which was not part of this. So I guess my point is, I'm not sure that's your problem. I appreciate the fact that you've proposed these things. I'm trying to figure out how we're going to get those into the 2A and cross-reference them to make sure that the things that you've included today in your presentation and your testimony are covered in the Form 2A. So I wonder if AAG Mercer can help us with that.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner. I'm having some internet difficulties, so I won't turn my camera on. If the applicant is agreeable, perhaps it could be as simple as if the commission is making a motion to approve, that motion includes all BMPs committed to in the applicant's presentation today. And the applicant and staff can work together to ensure that those end up on the finalized 2A.
Tyson is acceptable to that approach.
Linky, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, thank you.
Then I will make that motion.
Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add a couple clarifying questions here. Similar to the last application, have you had any conversations with BLM about the federal minerals to be produced here and any concerns being expressed?
Yes, and we've been engaged with BLM through the permitting process. We anticipate a decision regarding approval of those in early August. We don't anticipate any issues with receiving approval of those permits.
And then one of the things touched upon in the director's recommendation was the condition of approval about the Form 4 with relation to the other permitted facilities that is talked about in your disposal, or sorry, make sure I get the name of it right. Waste management plan, not the disposal plan. Are there additional facilities that you foresee using at this time beyond what was discussed in your waste management plan?
There's been no additional changes in terms of our planned disposal facilities at this time.
So it's more of a just in case a closer one comes up or something like that. That's what you're.
If we identify a disposal facility that allows us to reduce our haul route or something like that, it's optimized, we would like to have that option.
Okay.
And would submit the Form 4 as required.
Okay. Those were the only questions I had. I second Commissioner Messner's motion.
All right, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I just wanted to thank the operator for addressing my written questions in detail in the presentation. That was a good job, and I really appreciate that. One follow-up on the tank point, and I apologize if you mentioned this and I missed it, but do you intend for that same tank configuration to exist on the site for the length of the project, or would there be some potential for future reduction of on-site tanks, especially produced water, as it potentially tapers?
Yeah, I think, obviously we size our tanks based on anticipated peak production volumes. And so I think over the course of the production and life of those wells, should they decline, there may be an opportunity to reduce our tank count. However, we don't have any plans currently to remove those tanks.
Thanks for the clarification. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, we thank you for that. If there's no questions and we have a motion and a second to approve, we'll just go to acting on the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Wasilenki, and to your team. And again, great deal of thanks to our staff for the good work getting us to this point today. A lot of approved OGDPs that were the result of a lot of work on behalf of our great staff. So we really appreciate that. Commissioners, we've come to the end of our scheduled agenda. I don't have anything further. I would move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. See you next week, folks.
Thank you.